Well, I wasn't a good student for starters, Came from a family that, everybody has their struggles. And when I got to be about 16, it got a little bit tedious for me to do schoolwork. And I was in and out of one high school from another. And I finally, one day I said to my mom, I says, you're the head rosary bead sayer at the church there. I says, get me back into Bishop Egan High School because I need to get a high school education. Well, that didn't last very long. I got in, and the Cuban Missile Crisis was starting up. So me and a buddy of mine, we joined up on the buddy program, and off we went to Lackland, and got through basic training and everything. And I got stationed at Orlando Air Force Base, and that's where headquarters rescue was. And it was a missile maintenance base, no flight line or anything. There was a hospital there and a lot of lakes, but that's where rescue was hanging his hat at that time. And I was a clerk. They made a clerk typist out of me. I couldn't type, let alone spell. I wasn't the greatest student. And I disliked the military, because it was a challenge. Here comes this little guinea boy from Philadelphia, and I'm in the barracks with a bunch of hayseeds, and all they wanted to do was bounce my head off the wall. So I was in and out of struggles there for a while and got a little bad time. And I'll tell you about that and the reason I'm bringing it up. I got 10 days in the wire cage, where they let you out to go mow the lawn and shit. So I'm walking down the street, and here comes three guys walking up, and they got these black ball caps on, and they had this patch on that had a diver's flag on it, jump wings, and the medic cross. And I stopped them. I said, "What do you guys do?" "Oh, we're PJs." And I'm like, "What's a PJ?" And come to find out, it was Bob Wheeler, who you probably never heard about, but I can tell you about him for years to come. But I ran over to personnel. I got my buddy, Dave Slager. We used to hang out together. He was a sky cop. And we went in there and inquired about it. So they pulled out my records and they said, "Well, your GED scores are not high enough." So I go, "Okay, how to retake the test?" And she said, "Okay, well, you're not going to be able to go." I says, "Why?" She says, "Because you got 10 days bad time. You can't qualify." So I looked at her with a tear in my eye, and she said, "Wait a minute." And she took my records and went off and came back. She says, "No, you're good to go. We got rid of that." So she pulled that 10 days out of my record. So God was blessing me right then. So Slager and I off to jump school we go. Now he went at a different date than I. And every time I'd come back, I would come back to the unit where I was at headquarters. I was in Materiel Squadron, but they came down there when they were getting ready to kick me out of the Air Force for unadaptability. And they didn't fill out my OJT records properly, so I wasn't getting the training. And, this old sergeant was sitting over there going, yeah, shaking his head like, yeah, tell him you did it. And I'm like, no, that's not my signature. I'm not, I didn't do that. So a chief master sergeant named Cisco and Beganzio, these two chiefs, got me and brought me to headquarters. And I wound up working in the mail room, and I was a delivery boy. I went around in this big truck, and they was like a UPS truck, and it had all these shelves. This is how we did distribution back in those days, after we got rid of the horses. So then we went, and I'd have to go into each unit and drop off mail and pick it up and whatever. And I got accepted to go to Pararescue, and everybody told me I wasn't going to make it. You're not going to go. You're not good enough. Da 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 da. Well, I had fun. I went and I enjoyed every minute of that. Going to Fort Benning, come back from Fort Benning, back on the mail truck. Same thing with scuba school. Off to U.S. Navy. I went to San Diego for my training, second class Navy diver school. So we went out there, came back. All the other PJs students, they went into the barracks at Orlando. Me and Slager went back onto the gate, waving cards through, and I went back to distributing the mail. And then when we finally graduated from Pararescue, we got our beret. We were the first class to be issued the beret. And General Brooks gave us that. And he was a colonel then. And we were the first class to get the beret. That came out of May of that year, I believe it was. So off we went to Vietnam, went home, changed clothes, said hi to everybody, and here I am in Udorn, Thailand, with all kinds of expectations and what's going to go on. But my younger days were, like I said, they were going to throw me out for unadaptable to military service. What saved me was my personal hygiene. My shoes were always spit shine. My uniforms were starched out. My hair was right. And they couldn't figure out why I was so good with 3510, which is the regulation that covers your uniforms, that they couldn't figure out why I was so sharp and why I don't know, I grew up killing Nazis and Japs when I was a kid, running around through the job sites where they were building houses and rolling down the hills, and had my Daisy air rifle and a World War II hat, and all that stuff. Back then, there was a lot of, paraphernalia left over, and us kids used to get it and go out and play war. We used to make grenades out of little sandwich bags and fill them full of dirt and wrap a rubber band around them. So we conducted war there in Philly for a while. Yeah.
I think they're still on the streets doing that in downtown Philly.
Yeah. So we,
John,
yeah.
what year was that you went to Orlando and graduated? What year was that?
Well, I got to Orlando in like January or February, January of 63. I went in the service in November of 62. So you go to basic trainings, I think it was 6 to 8 weeks or whatever that was. And then I wound up at Orlando Air Force Base. Then when we went to jump school, I was going through pararescue training in 1966. So that's when I started in the pipeline. And the pipeline wasn't really established. It was coming along the way. I mean, there was guys that were in the career field that hadn't completed scuba school and whatnot, had been PJs for years. And now it was a requirement that you had to be scuba qualified due to the space shuttle and other things, as it materialized that we started doing a lot of water work.
So you got to Thailand, and then how long did you spend?
I got to Thailand in January, right after. Well, on the way over, I had to stop off in the Philippines for a little R&R, and at Jungle Survival School there, and that was fun. Enjoyed that, and then we got in country in January, I believe it was, and went right in, met Big Willie, and World War II guy, and he was really something else. Everybody looked up to him. He was a flight officer during World War II. There was a lot of enlisted pilots back in those days, and that's what Malcolm Williams was, gentle giant. Uh, and then there was Charlie D. Smith was in my class too, and Charlie was a senior guy. He was a tech sergeant back then, which I was a two-striper. I never got promoted all the way through because promotions came from the squadron level from up to E5, I think. And E5 came from hierarchy or whoever. But so the 13th, 60th Air Base Group at Orlando wouldn't promote me because they didn't want to give a stripe to somebody that was leaving. So consequently, I showed up there as a E3, I guess it was, two stripes back in those days. So it didn't take me long to get promoted to E4. And then they changed it and I became a sergeant. The E4 rank was designated a sergeant for some reason. They started playing around with the ranks. So I got in there in like late January, and I was there for about a week, and we were still taking tags out of our uniforms. And next thing you know, Hackney goes down. And I never met Dwayne Hackney until we took him off the airplane when he came in after being picked up from that mission. And me and Dave Slager and Trujillo, Pancho was there with us. And we toted him up to the emergency room, and they took some shot metal out of his ass and tended his burns. And because he had his sleeves rolled up and his arms got flash burned. And then,
Is that the first time you treated a patient outside of training? Was Dwayne
yeah,
Hackney?
I never even got to treat Hackney. I mean, we just wrapped him, sacked him, and carried him from the helicopter up to the emergency room, and that was it. I never got the. I mean, we got him in there on the table and everything, and then the medical people came in and asked us to leave. So that was that. Uh, and then I flew my missions, and then we, stayed there at Udorn, and they brought in the 53s within, I don't know, halfway through my tour, and they moved the H3 down to Nong Krom Phanom. So all the guys that wanted to stay with the H3s, which was me and Slager and a few other guys, we went down to NKP because the 53s were there at Udorn.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when Fisk and the class that was behind us, I think those guys, Roy Taylor, Verboni, man, it's amazing I can remember these guys' name. Not Rat, I can remember Roy, but Verboni and Patalier, a lot of these guys came in, and we were already there flying missions and doing the job. And it was fun. And I remember when K.O. Kelly came in. You ever heard K.O. Kelly?
No.
K.O. is, pretty good guy, and everybody knew him. He was well liked, but he was kind of funny too, because I'll never forget it when he showed up. We were pretty lackadaisical there because we were in a war, and we went and did our thing and came back and went and drank our beer and chased the Wahinis or whatever. And KO shows up. He's a tech sergeant, and he was new, and he was putting his things away and whatnot, and he unpacking. And I can't remember who was there with me. I don't know if it was Danny Broughton or one of the other guys. And KO says to us, we said to him, like, hey, my name's John Pighini. And he says, I said, what's your name? And he goes, well, most people call me Tech Sergeant Kelly. He started losing points real quick with that. So we loved him ever since then, because we just laughed and said, listen, KO, or or I forget his for Kerry. So Kerry, we never called him Tech Sergeant after that. Could never get it out of us, But it was a motley crew, and everybody did their part. I mean, there wasn't no loose link in that barracks where we lived. A lot of fun went on, a lot of harassment with one another. I mean, you go out and get shit-faced and come back, and you fall asleep in your rack, you never know what they're going to do to you. They used to set up IVs and let it drip on you all night. You wake up in the middle of the night soaking wet, freezing. So we had a lot of fun. We enjoyed it. And then we'd had some missions. We'd come in, and how Slager and I got on a mission was we were first there, and it was Hackney. Got shot down, and Big Willie's like, I need some PJs. And there's Slager and I, and we're still pulling out, inspected by 32, in the pockets of our uniforms that were so new. And they told us to get our gear, you're going. And we just looked at one another and went, okay, where's our gear? They handed us an A3 bag, and we started throwing shit in it. And the next thing you know, they fly in a Goonie bird. You know what a Goonie bird is?
No.
C-47. So the C-47 comes in and lands, and the runway was made of PSP. You know what that is? You ever see the metal runways with the holes in it,
Yep.
And I'm saying to myself, this is like Victory at Sea. We used to have a war program that came on that I watched all the time. And it was like going back in history. Loaded us on that, and they flew us down there, me, Slager, and Big Willie. And then they put us on other H3s, which was from a H3 outfit called Pony Express. And these were the guys that ran a lot of secret ops and whatnot, and they had a hoist, but it was one that they had to erect, it wasn't like the one on the Jolly with the handle and stuff, So, we're kind of looking at one another going like, what's going on? Never welcome to the war. So the next thing you know, they landed, and they had Hackney. They picked him up. So we didn't get to fly out on that one. And I think the PJ that picked him up, his name was Luther Davis. And we had two Luther Davises, and Luther T. Jones, who was it? He used to, Jonesy, I can't say what he used to say. It'll ruin your podcast. But anyway, Luther had 2 or 3 Purple Hearts already. And I was reading about him the other day, and I remember him. He was in another battle where he was really in the thick of it, and his helicopter crashed, and he kept running back inside to pull out the pilots that were getting burned up in there, and he got himself burned up, and he later expired at the hospital in Okinawa. But what a hardcore dude he was, So, that was my first year in the war type thing. And then, you get a mission and you got to go. And you're either high bird or you're low bird. And the low bird gets to pick up, and the high bird plays SAR to them in case they get in trouble. You can go in and pick them up. So all in all, shouldn't talk about this, but all in all, we had a really good time. I
Yeah.
don't want to expose a lot of fun things that we did. Probably our mothers wouldn't
Right.
love,
Would.
do it.
Yeah, of
We
course.
had a place that was called the Sugar Shack, and we all lived off base at the Sugar Shack. And there was like 6 rooms in this building, and then a center thing, and you had all the way around the end. And like, let's say me and Scott, we paid for this bedroom. So let's say you and I are good buddies. We share this room. We pay for that one, right? Well, there was always, 6 PJs, 4 to 6 PJs gone. So there was always rooms there. So that was running water, hot and cold, whatever you wanted was going on in that Sugar Shack. A lot of fun, a lot of, street little fights here and there, but all in all, it was a pretty motley crew, and we enjoyed it. And that's about all I'm going to talk about that. So it wasn't all war, and it wasn't all blood and guts. In fact, you'd pray for missions. There weren't that many that, there were, but they were being shifted around, And my first mission, I got 2 pilots punched out, one of them hanging in a tree. And I thought I was going to have to go down and get him out of it because he was kind of loose in the head and just hanging there, and he wouldn't respond. Then he finally responded, and we were able to get him on the penetrator without me going down. And we picked those 2 up, and we picked up some ground fire on that one, and nobody got hurt, thank God. And off we went, and brought him back. So that was my first rescue mission. And we went on, and I'd had other assists. I was a high bird on several missions. And one was with my friend Randy McComb. I don't know if you ever heard that name or not. Randy was a really good guy. And he was down on the ground picking up an F-105 pilot. And somehow I knew that 105 pilot. I don't know if I had picked him up before or something, but anyway, his bird got shot up, went over the hill and crashed. And I had to go in, and my bird went in and picked up the crew. And I got famous that day because the engineer tried to get on board, and he didn't bring the M60 with him. So I made him go back out and get that M60 off of that H3 because they'd be shooting it at us the next time we come up. I didn't care. I mean, he brought the ammo can too, which was great, but leaving that M60 on there didn't, I made him go get it, but we got them, and then when they got Randy, and I picked him up off the ground over there, and that was a very exciting mission. That day we were busy,
Was that July 3rd, 1967? Or is that the
Yes.
same? Yeah.
These were all in 1967, yeah. And there was other time when Duffy was on a mission, and I remember that, and his plane was on fire, and they're scooting across the top of his helicopter was on fire, and flames are coming out of that thing. And I'm like, I'm intense, and I'm pushing my mic button, and I'm saying, Joe, get out, And a pilot had to tell me to get off the mic, So it's crazy what's going on, at the time. But they seemed to control the fire, and they landed at one of the forward operating bases. They were all over Laos. There was little sites here, there, and everywhere that you went. And we predominantly worked out of Lima Site 98 at nighttime. That's where Air America had their hooch there. And we would go and spend the night there. And then we'd move up to 36, which right up along the North Vietnam border, not far from the Magia Pass. And we'd sit alert there and waiting for them to be shot down. And then when they get shot down, they go get them. I had an exciting one in July. It was a 2-day mission where the pilot was down, and we went out, and our high bird, I think it was the first day out, the high bird crapped out and they had to go in. And we all decided to stay. And, on the helicopter, we talked about it, look, if we go down, we're fucked, So instead of having that happen, we stayed and we tried to get in and get this guy. And no luck, because they threw everything at us with the kitchen sink. I mean, when we first entered that area, we were receiving, first time I ever saw a ball tracer coming at me, and 37 millimeter, little flak flying here and there. And then they were saying that College Eye was calling in that MiGs were in the area. So the pucker factor just went up immensely on that. So we didn't get him the first day. So we go back to the base and we land, and Colonel Britton was the commander there, and he comes in and debriefed us all. And then he turns around and says, all right, you guys, you go back and get some good rest because you're going back in tomorrow. And I'm looking at him and he's like, yeah, because you know the area. I'm like, we know the area. Okay, yeah. The area is nothing but a bunch of jungle, and I got to go back in there tomorrow. Okay, great. So I went back and I took all my magazines except my personal ones and my little, ammo pouches. We used to wear those ones on our belt, and we had a ammo can full of 20 round magazines. And I went down to and got all tracer rounds and replaced all the ball ones with tracer, because that 50 caliber balls coming at me really lit up my life, So I figured I'm going to load my gun with tracer because they don't know that all I got is an M16. So I blasted out of there with firing all tracers. So they must have thought I had a minigun or something like that, because every round was a tracer that was coming out of it. And we went in to get this guy Pritchard, and time after time we kept going in, getting shot off, and the A1s were going in, bombing, scraping. Everybody had their fingers in the pie, and it's really a good narrative on it. If you read the write-up for Greg Etzel, who just passed away, he was the H-3 pilot. He did that around the world trip too, flying the H-3. And his narrative has got all the stuff that went on in there. And while we were in the back, I guess, watching cartoons. So, what they said is they said that I exposed myself. And I felt a little bit embarrassed about that, because it's not often that I'm exposing myself.
I think you're referencing the write-up to your Silver Star. Yeah. You exposed yourself to enemy fire.
I think they didn't want, they didn't want to, I don't know why, but I think I hate to say it, but, there's professional jealousy in the officers, they write up what they want. I almost got in trouble really bad one time, because I came back off a mission and we had taken some ground fire in the rotor blades. There was some holes and stuff. And this young captain comes by and says, hey, Pighini, what'd you do? Shoot a hole in a rotor blade, And I just looked at him and I said, well, no, sir. I says, if you weren't an officer, I'd tell you to go fuck yourself. But seeing how you are, I can't. And he went and got Colonel Britton and to get all over me. And Britton told him to mind his own business or something. I don't know, but they never filed any charges on me, So that was the time when I loose lips, So, but pretty much we'd fly into 36. We had a hooch up there. I have pictures of it. And every once in a while, I'll put it online when they start talking about Laos here and there. There's a little shack made of plywood. And that's where we'd bunk out during the day. And they'd hook up a PRC 47 off the sponson of the Jolly Green. They'd hook into their antenna, and we'd listen to the bombing missions all day long, And then I've had a mission where a guy came in, and this is funny. It was pouring rain, and the guy punched out and he was injured. You think he broke his leg or something. So we find him, and it's in quasi-hostile territory. That means it is and it isn't, So we go in and we decided to land because it's pouring rain. And I said, I'll go get him, So I go to jump out the helicopter, and my mic cord was around my ankle. And boy, I went in the mud that quick in the rice paddy upside down. So this pilot's sitting over there watching me come out of there, hero of the day. So I get up, get the mud off me, go over to him, and he tells me what's wrong with him and whatnot. I see it. Okay, great. Pouring rain, I take out my radio and I call for the engineer to come over and help me. We're going to carry this guy over. So he comes over, and his one-man dinghy's inflated. You ever seen it inflated, the little one-man raft, right? So I said to the engineer, that's just he says, how do you want to carry him over? And I go, put him in the dinghy and we'll pick it up. So we put him in the dinghy. We both got on both sides, and we lifted him up and we ripped the handles off of the fucking dinghy. Pilot's sitting there looking at us like, you two fuck ups. Guy goes out and lands head first in the mud. And then so we just picked his ass up because we were being shot at, they said. And we just lugged his ass over and threw him in a helicopter, splinted his leg and got him back, But that's pretty funny.
You invented the Polish litter. You should have gone to North American Rescue.
Yeah. That was one eventful one. And then I had another mission where this Navy helicopter crew, they came across north of Vietnam, of Hanoi, came across there and made it into Laos, and they were shot up pretty good. And I tended to the engineer and one other guy on there. I think that I had to take care of him. Guy's fingers were fucked up. He took a round in the hand. Lucky it wasn't his head, it's the way you look at it, So patched them up, and then they had to leave the helicopter there and got all the paraphernalia out of it. And then we took the crew. I forget what we did with the crew, but they came in and blew up the helicopter. The A-3s came in and blew up the helicopter that they were in. And then we dropped those guys off at some site up there where they were picked up by Air America and flown back out to wherever they needed to go, So when you're there at that time, I did get promoted to E4. You didn't get much intel. You're just a young airman, and you didn't hear everything that went. I got selected by Colonel Britton to go on a mission, and it was to go up north. They called it some ridge up there where there was like several pilots that were shot down. And Colonel Britton thought that I'd be a good guy to send up there to work it. And I felt that I was pretty proud of that. I thought maybe he thought I had my shit together, or he was just trying to get rid of me. Because, we don't know if you're going to make it back from going up there. That's, a big helicopter ride. I did make it across the Black River, but not the Red. They had these two rivers up there, and the Red River, you cross that, you're in Indian country times 50, So from what I can remember of it. And frightening things would be like when you're in the middle of a mission and you're flying and they start calling in College Eye, which is a super constellation with a dish on the roof, and they pick up MiGs and they start calling it in, College bandit, but bullseye, and then the pilots get nervous, and, naturally you're going to have a MiG coming up your butt, in an H-3. And that has happened. We've had guys get waxed on there. So, and when you're at those Lima sites, you run. When I used to go to Lima Site 36, I used to go down and pick up all outdated medicines and stuff and take it up there, because a French doctor used to come in, and their little hospital, which was like they had a piece of plywood on some log stumps, and they had a potbelly stove cooking instruments. They boil their instruments, and the wounded Laotians would come in there to that clinic. So I would help them out with treating them. And, there's guys sitting around on the floor smoking opium pipes and stuff like that, keep their head straight.
Is this photo from that site, 36?
No, that one is from one where I got shot up. The airplane, we were going in on a mission and we got shot up. That's way up. That's like, 2 miles from the North Vietnam border. And we took some battle damage in our fuel pumps or whatever. We were leaking all over. So we limped into that. And if you look at that picture, you'll see the Laotian flag on the flagpole. And then at the helicopter, you'll see the little square plate that where the stars and stripes would be, and it's tilted. And what they did, they used to have a Laotian flag on some of them. on one side and the American on the other. And when we would land there, you'd slide that plate up and flip it over because we weren't supposed to be in country. We're not supposed to be in Laos. That war never happened, you know.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, so it was you only went there. You had a dog tag on, and no name tags, no nothing. You just had your dog tag, and that was it. You were not allowed to take cameras. Okay, so I had one of those little spy cameras, your James Bond. I finally got one of them and took some pictures, but you were hanging it out because they told us you weren't allowed to take pictures, or I would have had more, you know, of stuff that went on. Dead bodies and stuff like that. They were all over the place at Lima 36, you know, when they tried to overrun the base. I've got some other pictures of that village, and as I'm going through them, as I was getting ready for this, and I'm like looking at that, and I'm like, oh boy, you know, I mean, they were really messed up places. You know, it wasn't like they're not buildings; they lived in shacks. You know, and the kids just ran around with no britches on and pooped where they wanted to. You know, and it was all lined with punji stakes and concertina wire and whatnot.
Oh wow, that's crazy.
So you know, and then there's a half a guy laying in a bomb crater, and you know, it's just different gore here and there. You know, and you're exposed to all of that. You know, and in spite of that, you're out there doing stupid things like walking around in a rice paddy that's been mined. You know, and I did that like a dumb fuck. I didn't know it was, so they started yelling at me to get out of there. You know, so so am I lucky to be alive? Yeah, I guess I am. So is everybody else that flew and did things there. Because we go back to Lima Site 98 at nighttime, we had copious amounts of beer, if you want. So, everybody drank, and then went to bed. I had to sleep on the helicopter a couple of times because they were worried about insurgents coming in. And I'm like, you ever try to sleep on a lonely little dirt runway in a helicopter in bad land? You know how much sleep you think you got, So you're up all night sweating it out, So that was fun. Not really. Then what happened was my grandfather died, and I was very close with my grandfather. My father was a great guy, but he was a drunk, and that made life miserable. So I kind of clung to my grandfather, and he was Italian from the Dago. So he was a Dago. I'm a Dago. you know. So he died, and I spent a lot of time with him. And my cousin Freddie, who was a Marine, and what a war record he had. He was the 2nd Marine Division. He did Tinian, Saipan, and Okinawa. They were some of the worst battles. He was a BAR operator. And he came back and he started telling everybody that he just drove a Jeep. He drove the general around. He didn't do nothing. Well, that I got his records, and that was bullshit. And what's really amazing too is he wrote a couple of poems and a letter that he wrote that was read to the group. They're all about post-traumatic stress. And when you get back and you see these guys having a hard time and whatnot, he was kind of like letting people know that they should, help these people and not put them down. So they had the same struggles that we had here, with post-traumatic stress. And I would venture to say, I mean, PTSD and combat, it all has its effects on everybody a certain way, and they carry it and they handle it. And a lot of those guys, they never got any help. The VA was really not like Born on the 4th of July. Did you ever see that movie? This
No.
movie called Born on the 4th of July, and it stars Tom Cruise, and it came out long time ago, in the 70s. But it's all about the VA hospital and how he was treated after he got his legs messed up and whatnot. So there's a lot that the guys go through, and the older you get, the smarter you get, but you got to trudge forward. We got guys out there now, and it's like every time I go to the doctors, they say to me, "Do you ever think about suicide and whatnot?" And I says, everybody thinks about that. And I says, you can't tell me they don't. I says, but they don't want to be remembered that way. I don't want to be remembered that way. I mean, I don't know I'd have to really be suffering bad before I'd put a bullet in my head, but people choose to go out that way. And it's a darn shame. It's really a shame. So I wish they could do more for it.
Yeah, it's kind of hard when they're wanting to have the suicide prevention top priority. And the first thing when you're calling the VA, it's like you don't even have to, you can't even press 0 for the operator. They're like, hey, press 1 if you're going to kill yourself.
I know.
And they're like, oh, yeah, you want to talk to the dentist? That's 3.
They still, I mean,
Like, thanks for reminding me.
yeah, it's really ironic because I got this COVID pneumonia 4 years ago, and we had just moved here and closed on the house. We're staying in a hotel. And the next day, 2 days later, we went to dinner that night. I don't know if it was Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve. And I'm in an ambulance on my way to the hospital with COVID pneumonia. And I'm in Shands Hospital, and they had me in intensive care for about 5 or 6 days. And I called the guy over. I go, look, this shit ain't coming up. We got to get it done. I said, go ahead and intubate me and do it. You sure? You sure? I'm like, yeah, do it, So they did it. They intubated me, and I had an exciting out of body experience. But you want to hear about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I'm going to go on.
Todd does too.
I'm going to go on a different story now. Okay. My trooper there, Scotty Guerin, he was like in the first batch of guys that got selected to come to the 2-4. And he was up jumping with SEAL Team 6 guys up at Dam Neck with some combat controllers. And I don't know if you know his story or not. And he had a midair collision and all of that, So I was down at Fort Rucker or somewhere doing something with the Army or whatever. So I got wind of it. They flew me right up there. I get in there, and I thought I was going to have to call his wife, man. And I was going to lose this guy because his head was as big as a pumpkin, and he had a hose in every orifice of his body. I mean, this guy was lined up, and I'm looking at him like, oh, man, And I really appreciated Scott. I appreciated all my men because they made it through. We really sift the fly shit from the pepper in the beginning to get the guys up there. I mean, they continued doing it, I'm sure, after I left. But I'm sitting there watching them, and I'm like, okay, I stayed there for that day. And the next morning I checked on them, and I left. I had to get back to the unit. I got back to the unit. I was maybe there a day or two, and I went back up to see Scott. So I get up there, and he's like, hey, boss, everybody called me boss. Emilio started that. And rather than sergeant, boss was fine with me. I like fine. He said, I got to tell you something. I said, okay, Scott, tell me what do you got? He says, I saw I can't remember what relative it was, but it was grandparents first or his mom first. And you can ask Scotty, he'd tell you. And he starts telling me this, and I'm looking at him, and I'm like, quiet, Scott, I says, don't tell nobody. I says, I believe you, but do not tell nobody. And he's looking at me, and I'm like, they'll think you're off your rocker, and you'll lose your top secret clearance, and you won't get back. So hush up with it. So he did, and that was that. So I'm going through COVID pneumonia, and I'm in the hospital there, and they got me on the ventilator. And the whole time I was in there, I threatened to kill my wife, my kid, my daughter, anybody that was there. I was fighting the whole time, they said. And they had me wrapped up in a sheet, like a mummy. And how did I know this? Well, I'm floating around over the operating room looking down at them there, and they had knocked my front tooth out, which was a crown. And I saw the nurse pick it up off the floor and put it in an emesis base. So when I told them that, then they believed me that I was floating around. And I started to leave. And I started yelling for Scott, tell him I don't want to go, because he told me that he had started to put his hand through this cloud or whatever, and he was getting ready to go to the other side, and he decided, whoa, no, I don't want to go. And he says, I immediately then left. You have to get the straight story from him. But he said, no, I don't want to go. So while I was hovering over my body and everything, I'm saying the same thing. I don't want to go. And it worked. I didn't go. I went right back down into my body, and here I am today. So That's, me and Scott have been thicker than now, it can be all that time. We've been really close. So that was a pretty exciting thing to float around. So I believe in, people that do see themselves when they're out there having an out of body experience. Now, his was more intensive and lasted longer than mine, but I made it through all of that. And then I came home, and 6 months I was on oxygen in the bed on a walker for almost a year. And I fought my way back from that. And then the next year I started getting fit, walking out there, doing my thing, started having heart attacks. I had 3 occasions to get a ride in an ambulance. One time they had the siren on. It was pretty cool. Took me to the hospital and did a stint in me and cleaned out my tubes, I guess, or whatever. So it really kicked my ass. And then I have a hard time breathing. I lost 30% of one of my lungs, but I finally got a clean bill of health on that it'll never grow back, but it ain't getting any worse. And I should do fine. Because Beasley lost a whole lung and he stayed in pararescue with one lung for years. So, but here I am now, just starting to, like, I'm remembering everybody's name. I lost my cognitivity of things. It was incredible. I couldn't remember anything. And now I'm getting it back. I can remember different guys' names, like Michael Dean. I was thinking about him this morning. I'm always going through, especially we just had Memorial Day and we were starting to think about the guys, and they put some stuff out. And I know a lot of PJs that are long gone, passed by, and some of the old timers too. And knew them, the guys that started the career or pushed the career field along, like Nick Clements and, Big Willie, and just all these different guys, that really made pararescue in the early days. So,
Yeah.
and it has continued to evolve to what it is today.
What do you think is helping your cognitive function come back?
I don't know. I think it's the clarity of me not taking medicine. I take no heart pills. I take supplements. I work with a guy that is really a herbologist, and I shy away from surgeries, which I have had just before I got COVID. I had to have a total hip put in and eye surgery. And then I did a prostate surgery thing and they screwed it up on me. I mean, it was awful. I've had 3 surgeries on my since then. So I'm real shy of that stuff. So I've been on all these drugs, and you got to stay off of them. Anything that comes from the pharmacy is not probably good for you. And I take a lot of different supplements and whatnot. And this herbologist, his name is Donnie Hansen. He's the leading oncology herbologist in the country, and he speaks at all of these Moffitt Cancer Center places and everything. And his formulas work. I had kidney stones. He gave me a bottle of this juice, got rid of the kidney stones. I have a gallbladder stone. I knew exactly what a gallbladder problem is because when I was out of the service after I retired, I worked in the orthopedic business. And by on a fluke, I got a job working for a laser company because they wanted people to know how to use the camera that we did the knees with. And I wound up at Baptist Hospital in Nashville, and that's where they pioneered lap chole, which they go in and take out your gallbladder using the camera and whatnot. So we used to have the pigs. And of course, I worked with the PJ's medical school and we did goats. So I had all that history. So it was a very high paying job. And so I jumped on it.
You
And it really
were you in sales, med sales?
medical sales. Yeah.
Yeah, I did that too as soon as I got out.
Worked for 'em.
Smith and Nephew. I did orthopedic trauma.
Well, I used to be the distributor for Smith and Nephew Orthopedics in Tampa, Florida.
No way.
Way.
In Phoenix. Yeah.
Yeah, I was a distributor there, and I got that because I knew that this job was going to go away working for Laserscope, because what they did with this $89,000 laser you could do with a Bovie. you could cauterize the gallbladder and whatnot and take it out. We used to take it out through a condom back in those days, pull it out the abdomen, And I'm sitting there looking at that saying, I can do that with a $20,000 Bovie. You know what a Bovie is? Electric cautery, what they use in the operating room. So I knew that was coming. So I went and got a headhunter and I said, find me a job, So I interview well with these guys and I got this job. They offered me a place in Indianapolis, I think it was, or someplace else. They wanted me to go and run that. And I said, no, I'll take Florida. They said, Florida's number 58 out of 58, man. He's at the bottom of the pile. It's got one way to go up. In 2 years, I won the trophy. I got it sitting right up there. Distributor of the year, man. My picture's on the wall up there, the whole 9 yards. You know how I did it? I got rid of all the civilians. All they all wanted to do was make $100,000 a year. And that was a lot of money back in the 80s, And I got rid of the guys that didn't know how to work. And I hired 2 PJs. I had a Marine and an Army guy. And then I had a guy that used to be a distributor, not a distributor, but a sales rep for another company. And he didn't have a non-compete, so he could come over and brought me, business. And then another young man came in and he talked to me, sat down, he wanted a job with me, and I said, he's talented. You got all the right things. I says, but unless your father is an orthopedic surgeon, I can't use you. He goes, well, how about a brother? I go, your office is right over here. I heard him on the spot. 2 weeks later, another guy shows up. The word must have got out. His brother is an orthopedic surgeon. One's father and brother, man, I racked it up. We just knocking it out like you wouldn't believe. And then managed care came in to Florida. So I see the handwriting on the wall here. They came in and they're going to sole source it, where they went down and they said, you're only going to be able to use these 2 companies. And the companies had to get in there and bid it. And I took it up to Memphis, I think is where their headquarters was. And I told them, look, you got to do something, with this. Isn't that where it was? Is in Memphis, the headquarters for Smith and Nephew?
Yep. Right by that
My
big.
brain's coming back.
It's right by that big pyramid, the Bass Pro Shops pyramid.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And well, they had a B-50, not a B-52, one of the old World War II planes parked out there too. I think it was the Enola Gay. But anyway, God, look, see, I'm getting my brain back. So I go up there and I convince them, because they weren't doing it. They didn't do what I told them. We better do something. You need to bid this out. And they just kind of ignored it, ignored me. So I went, and I used to have long hair, tie and suits, I went to Brooks Brothers, bought me the best suit, wingtip shoes, cut my hair, striped tie, real Mr. Businessman. Went up there and convinced them that I wanted to work at corporate. I want to come up here and work for you guys in corporate. They came in and bought me out, bought everything I had except my delivery truck. And I managed it. I signed a contract to manage it for 2 years. Well, sole source came in and we lost business. Now my numbers were up, but the dollars were down. So what we used to get a total hip, I'd get $6,000 for the implants and I'd get another $500 instrument rental fee, and then a delivery fee, and then a restocking fee. So all these fees all went away, and my sales guys were total commission. And that was it. They were on their own, and and I told them, be careful, don't be buying boats and cars and shit, because the bottom's going to fall out of this market. And it did. And they went and they took the guy in Miami who was a pretty senior guy, not senior old wise, but like he'd been with the company for a while, and he did real well down in Miami area. And I said, if it was me, I would give all of these units to one guy, cut his commissions from 20% down to 18%, and then give him the whole state of Florida to manage and run. And that's exactly what they did, and I got out of it. I mean, we were at a hotel in Disneyland, one of them there with a dolphin all over in there. And these guys are walking around smoking their cigars and drinking their cocktails or whatever, their whiskey. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I can't take this shit. This ain't me, So I turned to the regional guy. I says, work me up a package and I'm done. I ain't putting, because, here you come out of the 2-4, you're a tier one operator and, I didn't fit. I didn't fit with this life, it just wasn't for me, so I got out of it. It was great. The money was great. I met a lot of fun people, but so many phonies out there. I mean, these guys are all patting each other on the ass, I'm like, I ain't got time for this bullshit. I don't know how you
Yeah.
found it, but I just like then
I
work.
I was never at the 2-4. But I did it for about 6 months. And people said, like, you want to be in orthopedic trauma, you're going to do it for a year and you're going to go get hired by somebody else. So I liked a fast paced environment. All the doctors liked the fact that I had a pararescue background. I was in there, talk to them, talk to anybody, think really fast, be able to adapt. Because I couldn't, when you were doing it, you could scrub in the OR and help. I couldn't. So there's a lot more liability issues now. So I had to tell the scrub tech, the nurses, everybody what to do when. So I'm lining up this 100-part surgery with 64 different devices and drills and everything
Crazy out the ass. Yeah.
with my voice. And they're like, well, this kid that, barely has a high school degree, not saying that's a bad thing, but it's definitely not a thing that translates well into like sophisticated medical talk. And they're trying to understand what you're doing. And you get really frustrated. And then the expectation is you are 100% ready to go when that doctor walks into the room. Sometimes it's not, and it's all someone else's uh, fault. And that person's fault is all 100% of the time the medical sales rep.
Well,
So
I
yeah, we digress into this all the time, but yeah.
we weren't allowed to tell people what we did at the 2-4 when I left. That was classified. You can't talk about it. You can't tell them shit, And it being new to that environment and everything, you pay attention, So they used to ask me what I did, and I said I was pararescue. "Oh, what is that? You drive an ambulance, this, that, and the other." And I just kind of muddled through it, and I'd tell them a little bit, but I didn't want anything to come back to bite me in the ass. But they, yes, we scrubbed in, and we not only scrubbed in. Sometimes I got very much involved, especially at East St. Louis. They had a hospital there, and that was on my. I don't know if you're familiar with that area or not, but East St. Louis is like. I mean, Philly's bad, but East St. Louis is real bad. I mean,
Okay.
the cops are driving around with a donut spare on their car. I mean, they didn't have their guns falling out of their holsters. But they had two orthopedic surgeons there, and one was a big gentleman. He was Afro American, and they shot and killed him 3 days after I got that hospital. Was my part of my business. And the other guy that was there, he was from Havana. He was Cuban. The nurses were no, they didn't have their shit together. They didn't know. So whenever they were calling me all the time to be there during the surgeries, so that I'd go in and teach them how to do stuff, and even shouldn't say I'm not going to do that in print, but took care of business. And
Yeah.
I have letters. I ran across one that this one doctor wrote a letter of thanks to me for being his rep and doing such as all my training came out with how you handle things. I mean, I lived in downtown St. Louis in a historical district in a Mansard townhouse because Barnes Hospital was real close, and I was Johnny on the spot when I was a rep. When I started with Zimmer. You familiar with Zimmer?
Yep.
Yeah.
They
And
were my competition, but
yeah,
yeah.
the reason I chose Zimmer, I was offered jobs with several different places because I have this big butcher block that I got in Italy, and I had that in my kitchen. And what I did when I was getting ready to get out, is I'd get up, shave, shower, put on a suit, coat, tie, get all dressed, got my briefcase, went into the kitchen, took off my jacket, put it on the back of the chair, put my briefcase down, set the phone on the butcher block, and then pulled out my portfolio thing, opened it up, and started calling distributorships. So there I was using my kitchen as my office and put me in a business in my mind. And I'd call around and I've got these appointments to go visit guys. My wife at that time was an airline stewardess, so I got free tickets. So I would fly. I flew from Fort Bragg up to gosh knows where, St. Louis, different places to interview for these orthopedic jobs, But I took Zimmer because their catalog was like this thick. They sold everything, the beds, the traction. And I figured it's got to be something in there I can be good at selling. Because when you first start, you don't know your ass from your elbow, knowing about the hips and the knees and all of this stuff, And so I did well. And I linked in with a couple of surgeons, and I'm not going to use their names, but the one guy was the attending. He was a big wig up there. And he and I got along real well. And I used to take all the residents, the doctors that were one of the wannabes, want to be an orthopedic surgeon. And I'd take them out at night for wings and beers. And then I'd have come in and we'd do sawbones. We would do them there, and I'd bring the child and all of that. I'd set it up for them, and I got to know all the residents really well, and they would get in trouble. They'd call me, what's this, what's that? And it was great. But anyway, this letter I got from this guy, and I just ran across it the other day, trying to find papers to make sure I got to you on stuff. And he really complimented me out the ass because, you don't show up to the airplane without your parachute because it's a hell of a jump. So I used to teach my guys to make sure you got everything you need when you get there. And they could call me night and day and I would respond. I kept things at my house and then also at the office, and they'd get called and guys in trouble, in the operating room, and they're in there and they need the Midas Rex. Midas Rex is a high powered drill to go into the intramedullary canal and take out cement and everything else. Because I can give you a story if you're inclined to listen to it. Eric's grandmom shows up, needs, fracture, trochanteric fracture. So we need to do a bipolar. You know what a bipolar is? We're going to put in a Fred Thompson, the little, like I've got them in the closet as bookends, and you just cut off the femoral head and you put one in there and you measure the legs and you make sure she's right, pump in a little cement, put it back in, everything's kosher, and you're out of there in 45 minutes, skin to skin. Well, this young doctor wouldn't believe me. I kept telling him that methylmethacrylate, which is bone cement, that stuff is temperature sensitive. And you're going to pull it out and use it, you better have the temperature down real cold in that room, or you better hurry up. And I kept telling this one guy, you need to hurry. He kind of gave me a dirty look, like shut the fuck up. Well, he got that stem halfway down and it locked up on him. So now he's in trouble. So now I tell him, don't mess with it. Don't take an osteotone and go in there. He did it. I'm watching him. Part of the femoral head, everything, the neck, he's just busting away. And I'm like, oh my God. So I finally got on the stop. And again, I got the Midas Rex in there and cleaned it all out. Took it an 80-minute tops, 45 to 50-minute surgery, took 8 hours.
Oh my gosh.
On Granny. I don't know if she lived or died. I didn't want nothing to do with it. The doctor wouldn't even look me in the eye afterwards because I know he felt so bad because he didn't listen to me. Yeah.
It was pretty new to being in the room with a physician, and it was one of my first like solo surgeries. And there was a guy who was in a shootout with the cops, killed a female cop, like ambushed her at a gas station, shot her in the head. She died. He was in the OR because they had shot him so much. They essentially just blew up his entire like proximal femur into his hip. So they needed to do a hip nail, which I sold for Smith and Nephew. It's the Intertem. And the doc who was on call for the OR that day was like, he comes in, I'm setting up the room, the prisoner's in there, not knocked out. He looks like crap because he's been shot like 10 times, chained to the bed. And he's like, hey, Nick, Good to meet you. Never used this product. I was like, okay. And it's like, this is at best, it's like 45 minutes. You're reaming, you're taking a drill straight through someone's femur, then you're going up the other way to get the ball of the hip back into for like an intertrocar fracture. It's not easy to do. And there's like guides, there's, stuff to do when you don't want to have like a visible cut down someone's leg. And he finished the surgery and he just like looked at me, he's like, and just walked out. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. This is like insane. But I mean,
Yeah.
do no harm, but it was
Yeah.
like free justice.
Now, I just going to tell you the best compliment I ever got in that orthopedic business was they were getting ready to do a total hip, and oh God, I forget what they call them. He's the attending or whatever, the senior resident that's doing the hip, right? So he's in the room and he's getting ready to start. So he has to call the attending who is in charge of it all. And his name is Clayton. I'm not going to tell you his last name. I don't want that to be out there, but Clayton's a great guy. We had a lot of fun together, but he was in charge of all these guys. Okay. And he's in there and he's ready to start this hip, not Clayton. So Clayton calls up, Dr. So-and-so calls up and says, what's going on? Okay. You guys, he said, yes, sir, we're ready to start. And he says, is John Pighini in there? And he goes, yeah. He says, okay, you can start. That was the best compliment I ever got as a rep. Those fucking guys.
Amazing. Yeah.
I was calling the shots. That was a really good kudo. And, if you're a good rep, you save their ass. I mean, oh God, we'll be here all day, but let's get back to Pararescue. You and I should have some beers sometime and we could tell you.
We stopped so your grandfather died when you were at NKP.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you moved through.
So I got to get out of country about, I don't know, 37 days early before my tour was over, And so I got to come out of there and they sent me to Hamilton Air Force Base is where I was going to be stationed in California. But I got to go home and bury Grandpop and all the rest of that stuff. So it was like, I didn't get to end tour DFC. Like they used to give you medals, like a Distinguished Flying Cross. You put a year over there flying combat missions and in and out of this, that, and the other. And they give you one. I didn't get mine. I got mine for a mission. I got it for heroism on a mission. And I didn't get that. And that kind of rubbed you a little wrong, because the officers always got what they needed, but some of the enlisted guys didn't, that was just my opinion, So
yeah.
Not that you were in there hunting for medals, but they all counted for promotion. I don't know if they still do, but back then you get 25 points, that's on do they still have that? Do you know?
Yeah, they do. They count. They're all scored differently, but yeah, it counts for promotion for enlisted, but not for officers. So,
yeah. So that's right. You were zero. Yeah. Forgot about that.
For me, I just sat in the seat and
yeah, if I had just got my degree before I got out and, if we would have had PJ officers, I would have stayed in, and I should have went and became a combat controller, but I wasn't up for that, Went from there to the base at Hickam. And then Nick the Greek came in and he was going to send me and Dennis Kraft and Bill Flower to Spain. And that would have been like at Rota, where, boy, I'm remembering a lot today, down by Madrid. But then I forget what happened, but I didn't go there. I'm trying to think of what happened. No, they changed because my mother had terminal cancer. They reassigned me to Pease Air Force Base in New Hampshire because that was the closest place to Philadelphia where they had PJs. And this is how well Pararescue takes care of people, and these guys got me assigned there so I could go home and visit my mother on a certain weekend. I'd drive from New Hampshire all the way to Philly visit my mom. Usually try to get a 3-day pass. I don't know if they still have that or not. You get 72-hour pass. And I did that for almost a year. And my enlistment came up in that November, and I got out. And it was like 1970. And I got out and went back to Philadelphia. And I went down to sign up to be a cop, took the tests and everything. And what I didn't do, my brother told me, because he was a cop, is I forgot to register as a Democrat, because Philadelphia was nothing but Democrats. And he says, you didn't get picked because you didn't register to be a Democrat. So I wound up being a park policeman in Bucks County for that year that I was out. And I said, fuck this. Mom had died. And after she died, I went back in the service. And they stationed me back at Pease Air Force Base until, and that was really good. In fact, I went to come back in, and the recruiter told me, we don't have any slots for you. You can't come back in the Air Force. And at that time, I was a staff sergeant looking for tech. And I called up, and Lou Roberts, a PJ, I called him up and I said, Lou, they won't take me back in. He goes, let me handle that. He says, give me an hour. I called him back an hour. Says, you go back to that recruiter. They're waiting on you. And I did. And they were waiting on me. He pulled some strings somewhere and signed right here. And off I went back in again. Went to Pease. And when I finished up, when I was at Pease, my mom died in February of 71. She was 54 years old. And they asked me where I wanted to go, and I said, if you need me in Vietnam, I'll go, but I'm not volunteering. I volunteered the first time. Second time, I'm not going to volunteer. And they said, well, we'll see. And the next thing you know, they gave me a hardship tour. And I went to Hawaii. And I spent 3 years in Hawaii. I was on a 4-year tour, and I had to get out of there because all we did, I was going to make Pararescue a career now, and I needed to get promoted, and I had to stop chasing and partying and doing all those things. So I traded assignments with a guy named Kimball, who wanted to stay in Hawaii, and I wanted to leave. So I wound up going to Eglin. So when I got to Eglin, I was a tech sergeant, I believe, or just newly tech. I'm making this a career. And the one thing that really bothered me about Pararescue was we never really got combat training. We got a taste of it when we went to Army Ranger School. We were allowed to go out there and play, what do you call it, aggressors to those guys. But we were never taught, the sneaky Pete shit, the stuff that you learned on the street playing war and you saw on TV. But we never got CQB. And probably they didn't figure we needed it because all we did was down the hoist business. Well, it was plain on my radar that when they started closing down our Huey detachments in the United States, especially up in Montana and these different places, we used to go and cover civilian automobile accidents and everything. And the Coast Guard started getting into doing more things that we used to cover, where ships were lost and whatnot. And all of that was going away because the Coast Guard was taking up those jobs. And it came to me that we weren't going to have a career field anymore unless we became, really valuable asset. So what is your valuable asset? You be a good medic, and you got to be physically fit, and you got to know your combat, your CQB. So when I got to Eglin, I brought that with me in my head, and there was a guy assigned there. His name was Heineman, and we had 2 Heinemans, but this Heineman, his name, I can't remember his first name right now, but he was ex-Army. So I got a hold of him, and I started talking to him about combat tactics. What do we do? So the next thing you know, I go over to the Army Ranger camp there and I can't remember the name of that Army Rangers, the jungle portion. And I talked with them over there, and they said, we'd be delighted to have you guys come over and work as aggressors to start it out with, and maybe give us some medical classes or whatever. So we started doing that. And then the next thing you know, that grew into doing SAR work, where we bring in the 53s to support the Rangers over there doing SAR work. And there came the concept of, pararescue and combat medicine. So when we started to do medical problems, we used to do Hollywoods. You know what Hollywood means?
Like a Hollywood jump, slick jump.
Yeah, with nothing, right? Well, you're going there and you're in your bathing suit or t-shirt or whatever, and you're doing a medical problem, right? No, we're not doing that anymore. So I made everybody wear their H harness with their weapons, all their ruck, everything, and here's your medical problem. So behind the section there at Eglin, we had a little fenced-in area. We would put smoke on them and things of that nature, and slowly started to metastasize into more and more of combat medicine. And then I did a thing, there's a letter in there signed, an LOE by Gil Martin. And I don't know if you saw that or not. Now, he used to be a commentator on a lot of the military historical pages and whatnot. And Joe, I put together a SARX, one of the first combat tactics, not a SARX, but a war plan, and we trained on it. And I forget what it was called, Nimbletoe, if my memory serves me. And I built this whole thing where I brought in B-52 pilots and all these different players to come in, and we did this SARX. Gino Nardi was there and a whole bunch of us, and we set this up and we started learning combat tactics. Well, Chief Walters was in charge of Pararescue at that time, and he developed a position at headquarters for combat tactics. And they brought in Stu Stanlin, and Stu was going to be in charge of the combat tactics thing. And that was fine. And then they took me and shipped me to Saragossa, Spain. And I did the same thing over there. When I got in, I took over that as the NCOIC, and I started combat tactics there and brought in the guys from England. I brought in the Spaniards, included them on it. So it was, inter-service type things going on with them. And we did combat tactics. So it was all growing from there. And the medical portion, I increased, the different things that I forget what we did, but we did them better. And the problems were, and you were doing combat training, but you were also having to plan that navigation routes, and just as complicated as hell for the PJs to handle it. So it came across really, really good. And then there was a fire in a hotel there in Saragossa. I sent you pictures of that. And what happened was Charlie Hart, and Charlie's still with us, he's a hell of a guy, was on alert that day, and a hotel was on fire downtown Saragossa. So they alerted us. We sent Charlie down there, and he's down there, and he's like got people jumping off out the windows. And I mean, there's a lot of flyers that night, people, poor lady, and it was before all those other Los Angeles, or no, in Las Vegas, they had a big hotel fire there, and we had already had this one over there. But we went in there on that one, and Charlie was up on the roof and his penetrator broke. So I said, I'm going down. I got to assess the situation. I can't do it from sitting in my desk. So I got on a helicopter and down I went. Charlie was on the roof. I picked up Charlie. We got him on board the chopper. The place is burning down. Smoke's all over the place. And there's a guy hanging out of a window. And he's slumped over, and smoke's pouring out that window. So Ken Reese was the helicopter pilot, and he flies over and they lower me down. Charlie says, I'll go. I go, no, you ain't going. This is mine. But not because it was my mission, but I'd really feel awful if Charlie went down and he got killed, and it was really I'm the PJ on the helicopter. I need to go, So that his wanting to do it lasted about 30 seconds. I'm like, no, I'm doing it. So I went down and I got him, and I'm putting a strap under his arms. This gentleman, he weighed a lot. He was pretty portly. And I hooked one up, and then I had to hook another one up, and I ran it down his backside, and brought it up and hooked him. Now I'm standing on my toes on a ledge about 2 inch, not even 2 inches, and my toes are on that, and I'm holding on to the curtain, and I'm tying this guy up, and the smoke's coming out all over. And I go to give a thumbs up, and I look, and the cable is like this. It's down by my feet, and I'm thinking, Jesus, they cut the cable on me. And the next thing you know, I'm jerked out of the window, and I went straight up. And that yellow thing that you see there, that goes on the top of the penetrator head, and you see where it's bent. That caught on the inside of the window, and my helmet hit it and my shoulder. And at that time, Ken Reese was backing up. He pulls out back, and then it pulled me out of the window, and then he pulled forward. So now he's going that way, and I'm going this way, and then I'm back up almost eyeball to eyeball with the helicopter, and Charlie's sitting there at the window looking out at me, and got an 8 ticket ride on that cable. What happened was there was an explosion on the roof, and it sucked the oxygen or the air out or something, or something happened where the helicopter pilot, Ken Reese, had to pull forward. So he pulled forward, and we got the guy down on the roof. Me and Charlie tried to resuscitate him, and then some Spaniards broke through, and then we went back out again and continued to try to rescue people and whatnot. And then that was the end of it. But why am I telling you this story? Was I won the Cheney Award. And that's an award that I don't see people getting anymore. And why, I don't know. I'm sure there's plenty of people that would qualify for it. Other PJs have gotten the Cheney Award. Hackney got it, and Tom Newman also got the Cheney Award. So Ken and I shared it. Ken Reese and I won the Cheney Award for that mission. And part of the things that happens with that is you get a $500 check. They pay you money, and you get choice of assignment. So there's Ken Reese wanted to be a fighter pilot. He didn't want to fly helicopters. Well, now he's going to go fly F-18s or 16s or whatever plane he got. And John Pighini got the chance of a lifetime to be curtailed 6 months off of my tour. And I wanted to be in charge of the medical at Scott Air Force Base. And Joe Duffy was there then, and they were ready to rotate him anyway, but that job was mine. And nobody, I didn't have to kiss anybody's ass to get the job, because I said, this is what I wanted. I told the Secretary of the Air Force, Hans Mark, when I was having lunch, my whole family was there, it was a big deal. And you get this beautiful bronze, so it's up over here, and on there, it's award, big round award. So I was going there. And when I got up to there, Dr. Brunstetter came in, and he was a new doctor, and I took over Joe Duffy's job. And one of the first things I did was I went down and I changed all the medical problems to combat medical problems at the schoolhouse. Everything would be done in a combat environment. And I got the guys all lined up for that. And then, pressed forward, and I came up with the KED board. It is a backboard, it is, and it's flexible. The slats run perpendicular up and down, but you wrap it around the guy and you hook it up. In fact, I had them manufacture one we used for the space crew for the shuttle. So we could just slide it down and get it on them, and then lift them straight up and out of the seat. And we ordered that KED board, and that was one terrific piece of equipment that we utilized back in the day. And I don't know what they use today, though.
The Skedco, it's a different flexible litter that can do vertical and horizontal raises.
Right. So we brought the KED board over, and and I just started the other thing that my job was as chief of Pararescue Medical was to go and visit all the units. And when I did, the physical fitness test fell under the medical guy. So I'm the guy that has to go out and give everybody their PT tests. So we had a lot of old dogs, and they'd go to NIF, and they didn't get to take the test because Pighini shows up and, they know I'm not going to cut them slack. I don't care if you fought in the fucking Civil War, you're going to take the PT test, So I got a really good reputation for being an asshole, So that is one. In fact, I actually went into a reserve unit, and you don't have to sell this, but I shut down Miami. The commander got fired, the NCOIC, and those are ARC jobs, those are civilian jobs. And that PJ NCOIC, he lost his job. The commander lost his job, and it went all the way to the Pentagon. But what happened was I went in there on the Thursday and I talked to the NCOIC and I told them, all your OJT records are up to snuff, all your medical gear is everything's perfect, everything's done. Please, these are the things I'm looking for, and I want to give some PT tests. Well, I didn't give any PT tests. I just shut the unit down. When I came back in on Monday, the trash cans in there were full of beer cans. They went out and jumped and had their fun day, and that was it. The medical gear was completely out of date, even their backup stuff, narcotics, everything out of date. Just terrible. OJT records. The only thing that was ever logged in there was the jumps. If I'm having to toe the mark, you got to toe the mark,
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the reserves, they used to, they'd fly, they'd do their thing, and they kind of like, well, we don't put up with that. We don't need to button our shirt, we're in the reserves. And if we like our shirt open, fuck 3510. Well, it didn't fly with me, and I treated everybody equal. I didn't have any favorites, but I expected you to know your medical, and I expected you to be physically fit. And that's what I would tell the men at the 2-4 too. You come down here, you are going to be the best medic that's walking the face of the earth, and you are going to be physically fit, even though I had gotten out and came back in and I wasn't peak perfect physically fit, but I could make it, and I made it. I kept going and going and finally got back because I was in my 40s then,
Yeah. So you were what, 43 when you went out to the 2-4?
No, I turned 40 in the PTP pit when I first got there. And when I left there, I think I was 43.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I was 43 when I left.
Was that your next assignment? Did you retire and then retract your
Oh,
retirement?
yeah. What happened with that was, and this is really funny because there's guys out there that you hear, I don't know. Well, they asked me to go and I turned them down. There's all that kind of shit that goes on out there. And Dave Milston knows the real story. And, of course, he was there and General Mall was there. But Randy McComb, who I heard me mention him before, he was driving down the road with his wife, Peach, in the car. And he had one of those tank tops or whatever they're called, where one side, they take the pieces off and you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
The roof
Yeah.
in the car. Well, a big tree
T-top.
fell down, T-top it's called, and it hit there, broke off and crushed Randy's head and killed him. And his wife sitting next to him, she didn't even get a scratch. And that happened at Scott Air Force Base area. Okay. So Randy gets killed. So I go out to the base a couple of days later to find out about the funeral services. What are we going to do for Randy? And I'm on terminal leave. Okay. So General Mall, I'm sitting there talking to Dave, and General Mall sticks his head in the door and says, "Hi, John, how you doing?" And I said, I'm doing fine, sir, and he's chatting to Dave a little bit. Then he turns to me and he goes, "John, what do I have to do to get you back in the Air Force?" And I was very matter of fact. And I said, "You need any more generals?" And he shook his head and he told Dave, he says, "Talk to him." So Dave talked to me and he gave me the information that everybody needs to know was, I can't tell you what the job is. All I can tell you is you don't have to wear a uniform and you don't have to cut your hair. And I laughed. I'm like, "Okay, Dave, no, that's it. Nothing." It was a Friday afternoon. And he says, "When you come back here on Monday, we'll swear you back in and then we'll tell you what it is." So then I'm back in the Air Force again. I can't get out of it. No. I had a job lined up with Ethicon. I was going to go out to California and interview and go through their school, and start selling medical products. So I'm there and I got my suit, coat, and tie on, and I go in, and Colonel Dutton, I believe, was the runner-up, what do you call, vice commander, and he swears me back in at Scott Air Force Base. And then John Carney shows up, Colonel Carney, and he sits down and tells me that they just did that Grenada operate. I guess it was that the medical school, Grenada, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And he had SEALs drowning, jumping with too much equipment, and all this shit, people getting shot up and all of that. And he said, I would have gave my left nut for a PJ. I didn't have any pararescue. Combat controllers were there on the runway and all of that. So he wanted me to come in there and establish the pararescue entity of the 2-4. And at the first time, it was called NAFCOS. Okay, and here I go off to there. They pulled my retirement papers, and I show up down there, and Carney told me, he says, they don't want you. I said, who don't want me? He says, the troops don't want you there, the combat controllers. And I'm like, is it me they don't want? No, they don't want PJs. They don't want you guys there. This is their show and they don't want you. Well, that didn't go over. And naturally, I got to pick one man to go with me, Emilio Hasso. And we got down there and we were sort of like in a selection process, along with some combat controllers. Then after the 6 months was up, we actually got alerted to go on a mission, and the mission didn't come to pass. So we never got, we weren't even trained. For what, I don't know, but we were medically trained. We knew our job as PJs. So we could have pulled it out of our ass if we had to. But then we finished up the selection portion. Some of the controllers didn't make it through. Me and Emilio did. And I started to develop. And in fact, they actually tried to tell me when I got there, some of the controllers, Mike Lampy, for one of them, was saying that your job is going to be our medics. You guys are there to be our medics and, et cetera. And that's not the way I read the story. So I just let it go. I didn't want to get in pissing contests with anybody. But Emilio, what an ace trooper that guy is. He was hard rocking. Everybody couldn't figure out why I picked Emilio. This guy was all over his game. He was a very intelligent individual. And he could do things that, just bright as could be. And he was young. He was a staff sergeant at that time. And he's got his ear to the ground, and he knew what was going on. And he's one that created the boss thing too. Emilio was a lot of fun, also tough too, man. You wouldn't want to get in a fight with him. He was a really stud, really good guy, loyal as can be, very loyal. And in fact, there was an issue one time when a colonel asked Emilio, or not Emilio, he asked one of the troops, what was the relationship between John and Emilio? And they said, well, sir, if John told Emilio to take one of us out, shoot us, we'd be dead, And that didn't go over really big for me later, But anyway.
I had a couple questions about just the beginning of PJs at the 2-4. So you obviously go there, and was it true like the controllers made you a little bit of an outsider from the beginning, or is it just the leadership? I'm sure the guys you went through 6 months of OTC with were very happy to be with you. They were like your buddies, or were they just like FPJs?
All of them. No, there was a
Really?
couple of guys. I think there was one or two controllers that were there, or one was trying to be there, that didn't make it through pararescue training and then became a combat controller. But to a man, I mean, I got this from a controller even after I retired. I was at Emilio's funeral, and there was a controller there that was very good friends with Emilio. He said, they never wanted you guys. Nothing personal. Wasn't about me. It was PJs. They did not want PJs there. So when they took a tally on it in the beginning, And Carney told me that going in before, that you guys didn't want, it's going to be a hard road. They're going to, they did not want PJs there. Why? I don't know. I don't know, just because I called him a tomato head or something. I don't know what it was, but I
Yeah.
knew controllers when I was stationed at headquarters, and they were good guys. I got along really good with all of them. Never, didn't suspect that there would be this animosity, you know. And what it was it about? I don't know. Maybe awards and decorations. I don't know, because Pararescue, we were getting them because we were in the war. They were in the war. They got them too. I don't know what the animosities were. Uh, and then the SEALs, they don't help you out. There was an interview on that guy that he was an ex-Navy SEAL, I believe, and he's something, Scott knows his name. And there was a SEAL on there that got in a letter, and somebody was asking him about the different career fields to go in, and he went through the different ones, Delta, MARSAC, all this. He says, they're all pretty much so the same. He says, PJs, no, man, they are off the chart. He says, combat controllers, well, the first 2 weeks of PJ school become combat controllers. So after they flunk out in the first 2 weeks, they become controllers. And I'm like, oh boy, that's going to be good for a relationship. So that's on Facebook now. It's out there. But anyway, so there we are there, and I had to put together what our job and mission was going to be within that confines of supporting SEAL Team 6 in Delta. The SEALs were very receptive to us, and Delta was kind of like standoffish, quiet about it. And you learn it's what you do today that counts, not what you did before. So there's no, I don't think anybody knew anything about my awards and decorations. I never brought them up to nobody. If you were there and you had to perform today for that. And the SEALs, I did some things with those guys. They taught me close quarter battle, in the kill house, all of that stuff. And we had to do what they did. And you took your rucksack and put it on with your med kit. You climbed up that little ladder on the side of a ship, and you're with them, and you fall in line. And we carried back then 6.86s. They're
Yeah.
seven shot Smith and Wessons, and that we put paraffin wax in the cartridge, and we would shoot you with a paragraph if you were a terrorist. The guys that volunteer to be terrorists get shot with the paraffin wax. So you go clear out. So you're in line with the SEALs, and you got to take down that room. You're going right in with them. So you learned with them, and then people get hurt and different things, and got a lot of compliments for our medical skills. And those guys wanted us on their team, and that's how it went. So
I
we
got a
did
couple
that.
questions too on kind of like the integration aspect of it.
Well,
How
whenever
did
they
you like
went anywhere, they
start?
wanted a combat controller naturally, which is a smart
Yeah.
thing to do because he's got that air power. And they wanted the PJs because of the medical, and we're able to shoot and scoot right along with them, And most of our guys, they should tell them, keep your mouth shut, do what you're doing, don't that, you're in their ballpark, it's their game. I say, you want to go blow something up, then you go become a SEAL, or you want to do this, go become there. But you're a PJ, you're medical, and that's what you're there for, a high-speed medic. And we did all the jumps with them, nighttime deployments over the beach, everything there was. And it was kind of fun because when they found out how old I was, they couldn't believe it. This one SEAL, or remember Emilio, we're sitting there, and we got picked up by a fast boat, came in and got us after we jumped in and went over the beach and did this exercise shit. And we're coming out, and this one Navy SEAL sitting there, and he's going like, oh, I'm really just getting too old for this fucking shit. And Emilio says, how old are you? And the guy goes, 31. And he looks at me and he goes, he's 42. The SEAL fucking looked at me like, oh boy, and I was kind of like the old guy. But anyway, we started to create and build a medical package for JSOC. Okay. So I wrote up all the how-tos and coordinated it with the hospital and with the Army medics and doctors, their PAs and all of that. and I would train with them guys. I would get them involved with things. And I also created what they call the SAR package, where we were down at Rucker, I guess, someplace, and we had like
Hunter.
5 or 6 53s there. And there was an H3 there also. And I went up to those guys and I said, well, what are you here for? And they said, we're just here and we didn't have a job, you know. I go, you do now. And I went and I got this Army captain that I met. And is Scott fall asleep there?
Oh no, he was just trying to tell you. Was it Hunter, not Rucker?
Yeah, it was Hunter Army Airfield.
Hunter, or you were there. Okay. So I go and I get this captain who I went through Halo school with. And I says, what are you doing? He says, I don't know. We're here. I got my men. You know, I says, well, I need a squad, a rifle squad. And I said, I need them to be litter bearers and also for protection. And I put the SAR package together where I had the 8 or 9 Rangers, 10, whatever it was, and combat controller and 2 PJs. And that was our SAR package. I believe it was 2 PJs that were on it. And I put that into an H3. And of course, they had the 53s. They had all their crews with the Delta guys and the SEALs on them and all of that. And we go into this briefing hall and they got a big thing up on the wall. And there's all this stuff where this nomenclatures for different things that are going on, whatever, you know, who's going to handle this, who's going to handle that. And it only goes down to and there's a thing up there that said, I think it was SAR or something like that. And General Steiner goes, what's this SAR thing here? And I had to stand up and they go, where's your officer? I said, we don't have any officers in Pararescue. And I explained to them what I had set up was a rifle team with the Army Rangers and 2 combat controllers. And I says, and, you know, and 1 combat controller and 2 PJs. And we're there to take care of any wrecks or shots up or whatever, you know. So that was kind of like, and Steiner just looks at me and looks around the room and he goes, that sounds good to me, you know. So that was it. And I did that and nobody told me to do it. Nobody asked me to do it. I just did it. And I found out that within that arena at that time, it's better to do something that you think is right and worry about it later, you know. And if they didn't like it, they'd tell you. But everything we did, they liked. And we were moving right along. And it got to the point where, like I said, the SEALs would call up and they'd want PJs to go with them on a mission. And they did. And sometimes they didn't ask for a combat controller, which created a little bit of heartburn. And we got past that. So we set that up. And the roles and mission were that we would deploy and we would not be attached to the airplane. And my guys could log air flight time on every airplane, whether it was Army, Navy, Marine Corps. I don't care if they had a balloon, we were going to log flight time. And I got that through Air Force and everything else. So we didn't lose our flight pay. And so I don't know where it's at with that today, but we collected our flight pay. And at whatever plane we got on, we were crew. And so we got that going. And then it came time to set up a selection. How are we going to get the new guys? You know, so it was just Emilio and I and a combat controller named Tim Brown, who just passed away last year. Terrific guy. I mean, just a really, really good sergeant. You know, I mean, he really honest man. And he and I went out and they wanted to pick a place to do the selection process. And I had a place, I knew a really ugly place that we could do this at. So we went and we checked out where Tom wanted to go. Tim Brown wanted to go. And I said, now we're going to go to Dahlonega, which is the Army Ranger School in Dahlonega, Georgia. So we go up there and of course they had everything. You got the 60-foot cliff for rappelling. They had water, so you could do, you know, water ops all there, you know, rope things. The mountains were there. The terrain was just terrible. I mean, you bust your ass orienteering through that stuff. So everything was there, and the barracks were there, and the chow hall, everything was really great there. So that's where we got selected to go. So our first one we did uh, was with the cadre, where everybody came up, combat Major Tapperode at that time. He actually came through up, and everybody went through the selection process and got a taste of what the people were going to do, have to do to get to that team. And it was a lot of orienteering, and I guess the controllers had to, play with their equipment. They had radios. We had that. They repelled down off the mountain. You had to go do something with the radios, and then with weapons would be all apart in a box, and you had to put them together. And medical problem for the PJs, and just all these different things that do your skills, show your skills and see how you performed under stress. So we put the selection process together and started running it, and slowly but surely, we got guys to come in to do the test and come on board. That's when Scott and Larry Hiakamoto and Al Mora, and there was one other. Who was the other guy? Wasn't there four of you? We took just the three of you. Just the three of you came in, and we started OJT and them on what goes there after they got through selection, and deploying on all the missions. And we deployed on every hijacking, starting with the one that they went into Beirut. They killed a sailor as a TWA flight, and they killed that sailor and threw him out onto the tarmac. And we were deployed on that. We were supposed to go downtown and take that plane out. We had trained on a TWA plane. We were hit out in the med somewhere. And that's when I developed the battle pack, where we gave a 500cc bag of ringers, an IV setup, and Curlex, Airway, Berman Airway, different things that I built into this bag, and a Ziploc bag that every man got. And they got 2 syrettes of morphine. Each guy had 2 syrettes of morphine. And I told them, put them in their shirt pocket, one on one pocket, one on the other, in case you get hit. You can't figure out where it was, or everybody knew where the other guy's drugs were, so they could administer them if they needed it. And then we ran classes. Amelia and I ran classes and taught these guys what we needed to do. And we got up and we were flying in. We trained on another TWA, which in the hangar where we went, and we got up and trained on that. And one of the Delta guys, he was a machine gunner, M60 guy. He slipped and fell down off the wing of the plane and slid off, and he fractured his ulna right here, his wrist, above his wrist. And I had at that time these little cans that had a device in it, looked like a grenade can, but it was full of rosin, I guess it was. I don't know, that really, it hardens real quick. I can't remember the name of the stuff that was in it, but you'd pop it. You would dress the thing, put a Curlex on the arm, you splint it, like, in other words, you reduce the fracture as best as you can, and then you put this thing on his arm, and it hardens up, and he's got a cast, because he wanted to go on that mission really bad. And so we got that guy squared away. And that was when the relationship started to work with the Delta guys and the SEALs, that they saw that we had our shit together, And we deployed on that mission. And I was on headset because I convinced everybody that Pararescue was in charge of precious cargo. That was our forte. Once we got there, we take control of the casualties, and because they're going to want to know, what's going on, and they're going to have to get it from the medic. So we go through this thing, and so we don't go. We RTB. Mission done. Whatever happened, they solved it. We did not. We could have took them down. I mean, the odds were great. There was like 35 of us and 5 of them. It would have been no problem whatsoever. I think Scott fell out of his chair, but he took a nosedive. But so that was the first time we really intermingled with them. And that's when I became friends with this Army Delta guy. He was a major at that time. In fact, he and I used to have beers together at Bennigan's later. And I'm not going to mention his name, but his father was a 4-star general too. But I really clicked with them in planning and stuff like that. So they started really looking to us for info on the medical and what we would do with casualties. So then we got deployed on another one, hijacking, and the Achille Laurel that Scotty was talking about. And by then we had him and Larry Giacomoto and Almora on board. And we're out there and we're hit out again, and yet you couldn't go out during the daytimes because the Russians were sending satellites over looking for us, So we would go out at night and go to the firing range and, go down by the ocean and dive in and swim a little bit or something. And we're in there eating beans and bangles or whatever the hell that we were getting fed. So almost a month, I think. It was a long time. I think it was this mission. So they killed Mr. Klinghoffer and rolled him off the ship, okay? And that's common knowledge. So we're going to take that ship down. So we got I believe we had Black Hawks. They were new helicopters that were out. And we were loaded up and we're getting ready to go in and take that ship down. And then all of a sudden, they turned themselves over to the Egyptians. Somebody leaked it out that we were coming. Typical shit that goes on today, that there's always some mouse up in Congress or somewhere, some politician somewhere leaks it that the boys are on their way, right? Like they got people killed on this last operation. Same dude, same stuff. So I give Redolin to all the SEALs and everybody, and we're RTB. We're going back to brag, right? So I give them Redolin because it's a sleeping pill. So I give all these pills out. Everybody's snoring away, and I hadn't taken mine. And the next thing we know, that the Secretary of the Navy, I can't think of his name right now, he has the Tomcats forced down that airliner in Sigonella. But they land on the Italian side. How convenient was that? So we land, we're in a 141 jet. I mean, we used to jump it all the time, but we land and we had the cracker box there, that like the UPS truck, and Colonel Downing. It's amazing how these guys that come out of the woodwork they're not operators and they want to get involved. They got to get on that plane somehow. But anyway, Colonel Downing, I think it was his name, he became the truck driver. All us operators are in it. So we go out to the airplane, we drive up and we get out, and Emilio's with me, and Steiner's right over here about 10 feet away from me, along with Bucky Burris, who was a big name back then with the Army Delta guys, and Gormley. He was the SEAL Team 6 commander, Bob Gormley. Terrific guys, really down-to-earth men. And I really appreciated who you were and what your job was and what you were doing. And so they're all there in Steiner. And there's Abu Abbas. There's this guy, he's a real badass terrorist. I don't know if you ever heard about it. And any one of us could have put a fucking round through that window that he was peeking at and took that son of a bitch out. But they got the rampway going up and the door comes open and out comes this ambassador, I guess, of Egypt or whatever. And Steiner starts chit-chatting with him. And I'm like, okay, let's go. We got to shit or get off the pot, And they're chatting away, and then they start pushing and shoving and everything. Everybody backs off, and they come back down the ramp. And I'm like, oh, boy. And Emilio comes up and says, John, here come the Italians. So the Italians are coming down the road, and they get there, and Emilio, I just find out what they want. Emilio comes back, and they said they want to know if that's an Italian airplane. Whose airplane is that? So I wave the guy over, and the guy comes over to me, and he looks at the airplane. He says, that Americana Alabassa. That's how I learned how to speak Italian. See? And I looked up at that Egyptian flag and I looked at him and I said, "See, Americana Alabasta." So he went and got, Emilio's looking at me, and he went and he got in his car. Well, off they went. So I went over and I told Steiner, I mean, "Hey, sir, we probably got 6 minutes to do this because the Italians just left and they're coming back, So that's what happened. The SEALs were out around the whole airplane, and they were in my other ear. I had one ear amongst our guys, and the other ear was, anyway, I could hear them out there, and they had the whole thing covered. That little movie that they made about it was bullshit, it's not the way it went down. So anyway, what happens is they get the terrorists off the plane and they put them on another smaller airplane. And of course, Bucky Barris went along with whatever in another plane to follow that plane that went to Rome or wherever, I don't know. But the whole fucking thing disappeared. It was over and done. And they finally ironed it out with that crap. And we didn't kill any terrorists. But what we did get to do was we sat on that fucking flight line in that 141 for probably 70 hours. They would not let us take off. So we were all there. The honey bucket was overflowing. We were out of food. We were lucky that we didn't run out of water, but it was a real clusterfuck, and we couldn't take off until the Italians gave us permission to use their runway, which we were parked on, to take off.
Oh my gosh.
There goes another fucking one that we could have been heroes, but we were zeros, Now that second total prom I got to go to that we didn't get on the dance floor. Okay. So then,
well, just maybe a comment more than a question. You got promoted to senior master sergeant in 85. You were doing all this as a senior master sergeant.
Yeah.
It's just like shocking to me in a way that you were at such you're the top of your game as a 40 something senior master sergeant, and you were out there doing it, and you were the first PJ at the 2-4 as the guy that like won the trust of both Delta and SEAL Team 6 to be able to do that as a senior master sergeant, being an advisor to SEAL commanders and everything. Like, that is so.
And the Rangers.
That is awesome. Yeah.
It's all like John didn't mention some of it, him and Emilio, then me, Larry, and Al. There was 5 of us. So the bread and butter mission of the unit then was airfield seizures. Every quarter, a different Ranger battalion was doing an airfield seizure exercise, and we were on every one of them, landed on runways, and then doing those round robin iterations. And that's when John really got the STAR plan going. It was called it a burn and bust scenario, because that's what every Ranger would take through that burn and bust scenario with the actual buffs and tires, and learn that how stealth STAR went when you had that helicopter with the 2 PJs, controller, and about 10 Rangers on it when we would do those missions, which evolved into what Black Hawk Down pretty much scenario was, with the SAR package that went in, because that was Scotty and Tim and the combat controller, name right now.
That SAR bird that we put together, there was 5 or 6 53s, and we were going on training mission. So we're out there taking off, and here we go. We got the SAR bird, and everybody were going. And I actually had a doctor that he was a wannabe, and he wanted to be involved. So I took him on the H3 with me, let guys some flying time. He turned green with all the yanking and banking, We go out there and we're zinging along. And all of a sudden, one of the 53s was too tight on the guy in front of him, or the guy in front of him slowed down, and he couldn't make the turn around the mountain, and he crashed into the mountain. So now I got this H-53 rolling down the mountain, with crews on board, etc. So we hit it right away, quick. Boom, I'm on top of that shit out there. The doctor, he was lost. I mean, I had to, sat over to the side here, take care of this. And we went in and cleaned that up. took care of all that. And Steiner he was on top of that. He was there right after it went down. I guess they brought him in on a little bird or something like that. And he really complimented the hell out of the pararescuemen and whatnot that went in there and cleaned that mess up. And in fact, I think I got a achievement medal or something. Not that I care, but I mean, I do. It was nice. It was a nice award. But that bird functioned that night, right then and there, that we had that SAR bird. And the pilot of that 53 got killed. He was a Medal of Honor winner, and he got killed in that. The combat controller that was on board that helicopter, he survived it. Jerry Bennett, terrific combat controller, really a good squared away guy. And his call sign was Ragman. I don't know why you called him Ragman, but that was a night to remember, you know. So Steiner had a firsthand view of pararescue in operation, cleaning that mess up. So that was that story. So where were you going now? What was the next thing you asked me?
You'd mentioned the C-130 crashing into the 60 on an airfield seizure training.
Oh, yeah, that one. Yeah, that was one, you know, they used to deploy us and they wouldn't tell you whether it was real or it wasn't real. So we're on a C-5A and we loaded up little birds in there and also the Black Hawks. I think they had them on there. We fly across the fucking world and we hit the operation base that we're going to operate out of. And, you know, my job on there was to go and set up the casualty collection point on the runway that we're seizing. And there was a building there that Delta was going to take down. And I had 3 Rangers. Actually, I think it was 4 or 5 Rangers in the helicopter with me and Tim Brown, controller, and Mike Lampy, controller. And there was a Ranger sitting in the middle of those two. And there was 2 or 3 on this side. So I'm sitting on 2 5-gallon jerry cans full of gasoline with some of that mohair stuff for padding. And I'm sitting on that and I had my sit harness on, you know, your climbing harness, you know, for rappelling. I hook into the floor, right? Because where everybody stopped at safety in the real world, we started there. You know, nobody's tied in, none of this shit, which I thought was silly. But we're hover taxiing down the road. I'm listening to one ear, it's on within the team, and the other one is back to headquarters. And I'm hearing all this stuff going on, and the guys are jumping out, and they're actually on the way in. We were about 30 knots and 30 feet. One of the controllers went out the door, and we had to take care of that later. But anyway, we kept on going. We get down there and we're getting taxiing along, let out the Rangers, and they go out and move some obstacles off the runway and back in, and we're hover taxiing down, I guess maybe 4 feet off the runway. And the next thing you know, I have my nods on, it got real bright. And I'm like, Jesus, Delta must have blew something up, you know? Well, then I'm like a BB in a ping pong ball. The helicopter is shaken to death. The blades are crashing. The blades are flying out. The Rangers are jumping out. I grabbed one guy by his harness. They don't know better than to go out until that thing shakes itself to death, unless it's on fire, you know. And they got chopped up pretty good. The pilot and the co-pilot got their arms tore up because it was such a violent crash that their arms were flying around in the cockpit and hitting all the instruments and stuff. It just ripped them up. And so then, you know, I got my foot smashed by one of the jerry cans, I guess, both of them, but I got a cut in the ass and I had hydraulic fluid and all over me. And I'm thinking I'm going to go up and be a Krispy Kreme here in a minute. But it's finally settled down and we got out and Delta showed up, or somebody. I remember one of the Delta guys was there, and we started cleaning up, you know, getting the guys, and they had a hold of it. And this one Lieutenant Colonel Army guy, I remember, can't think of his name, but they named the road after him up there. Super guy, and God, I can't remember his name. But anyway, I left and I ran down the end of the runway to find my teammate that was in that helicopter, the combat controller. And he had fractured his arm and, and got some lumps and bumps all over him. And I didn't know what happened. And then another helicopter came in and it picked us up. It was an H3, I guess. I don't know what, to this day, I don't know what helicopter it was. And I get inside of it. I knew I could stand up in it on my feet. So it had to be an H3 or something like that. And I got this controller in there and I'm going to start an IV on him. And I look up and here's one of the PAs from the med package that we had put together with the surgeons and all of that. And I looked at him and I said, what the hell happened? He says, you got hit by a C-130, stuck his tire in your rubber blades. I'm like, what? And I said, you're shitting me. And he's like, no. I handed him the IV. I said, you start this fucking IV. I went over in the corner and lit up a cigarette. Holy shit. A C-130 stuck his tire. I mean, that's how close he got. I mean, a hair one way or the other, I would have been a dead man. You know what I mean? And that's C-130, everything. What a catastrophe that would have been. And nobody knows about that. Now you know. Now you got a picture. But that was a pretty exciting evening, let me tell you. That was really, really something to write home about. I never really think about it. It's frightful. I mean, I still see it now and then. You see yourself running down the runway on fire. How do you put out hydraulic fluid? Roll in the dirt. By the time then you're singed. Thank God nobody got burnt.
You basically got that one patient into that helicopter, possible H3, and then you figured out maybe after the adrenaline wore off, like, oh, I got hurt in the midst of this whole thing. Or did you know immediately you were hurt? You were just pushing through it.
I just pressed through it. I mean, my foot hurt. And of course, you get your toe broke, it stings a little bit, but that's not a big deal. You do that playing on football,
Yeah.
But no, that didn't faze me that much, And you just think about it. The cut on my ass is when I put my hand back there, my pants were torn too. I don't even know how the seat of my pants was ripped out. But when you stick your hand back there checking, you feel that slime, you think it's blood, and it's hydraulic fluid until you taste it. And then you find out you thank God you're tasting hydraulic fluid and not your ass,
Another day you exposed yourself from the beginning.
Yeah, there I am exposing myself again. So we got through that one. And there was something else too I wanted to tell you about. We got alerted for another mission in Malta, I guess it was, Scott. And we go down there and here we are, And back in those days, it was
that was an Egyptian airliner that was hijacked. It was taken down on Malta.
In Malta. So we show up there, and I'm General Steiner and I became pretty good buddies. He had me right there with him, and all of a sudden we get the call to back off. We're out there on the runway getting ready to go down and get all lined up around this airplane. So we backed off, and we backed off about, I don't know, 500 or 600 yards or more. And next thing you know, the Maltese went in there and blew the fucking airplane up. They killed the passengers and everything. It was terrible. What a mess that was. Were you on that, Scott? Scotty, you were there for that.
Yeah, I was there with you.
Yeah. That's what I thought, and you were there. There's just so many stories. When we were hit out one time, we were getting ready to go in downtown Beirut, was it, somewhere? And I had to go out because this was going to be a real clusterfuck. We were in planning, and we're planning on going in, and we had different people going different places. And I was with Captain Gormley and Billy Ackerland, who was their senior non-commissioned officer. And we were going to go in and take down where they supposedly had some of the the hostages. Some were in the library, some were at the fire station. I know we were going in the fire station, and the other places, other birds were going into, and we were all ready to go do this. And the plan for if your chopper got shot down, we carried our fins with us because we were going to go, and the Navy would come in and lay down CBU and cut a path for us to the ocean. And we were going to go out there and swim out and get picked up by boats out there, and that was another like holy shit time.
Well, that was the primary exfil pickup plant, was get to the beach and swim.
Yeah, it was really that was a fun one. And I had to go out to the aircraft carrier and talk to them about, so I know where to send the casualties and everything. So I get out there on there with that, and I did a little thing, but I've never told anybody about this. When I get on the carrier, they didn't know who I was, but they knew somebody was coming. And I had a black full bird colonel's medal insignias, that they wear. And I had that in my pocket. So when I got off the helicopter, I pulled my wallet out or something and purposely dropped that full bird colonel's tag on the floor. And these guys were standing around and they saw I just bent down, picked it up, put it back in my pocket. Well, I got the red fucking carpet treatment on that carrier. Let me tell you, I got to go and sit with the commander of the fucking carrier, the Guam or something. I ate and they bought me food and I got to see everything. And the chow hall was what they used. The mess was going to be the emergency casualty collection point. And they had one room that was like a dental place, but that was going to be the operating room. And I went down to the Gidunk, what they called, and that's where you buy games, and I bought all these games and shit and put them in the helmet bag and took them back for the guys and stuff. But man, I just, I set the precedence for who we are and what we are. And, I just didn't want to hear any bullshit, So
I don't think it was the Guam, John. Whatever it was, I don't know what you were on, but I was on the Guam.
I know. I forget. It was a Mao plane because they had all those landing, those things that they have that they put the Marines in and take them ashore. I forget what they called those things, but they were in the back of it down there in the back. They had a bunch of them there. But that was fun. And that was a whole lot of nothing. We didn't do anything to get them. And then I took my guys and we all RON'd at some base. I forget where it was, but it was out there in the Med. And Emilio comes in and he goes, "Hey, boss," he says, can we have some beer?" And I'm like, "All right, 1 can of beer. That's it, 1 can. Gotcha." Well, the cans were quarts. They had quart cans in the machine over there. Do you remember that, Scott? Were you there for that one?
Secretary.
Unbelievable. And then we hijacked the SEALs, hijacked the bus and took us somewhere. They hotwired a bus and we went someplace. I can't remember where the hell we went. And then we went on another one out to California. We hid out in a hangar out there in California for, I don't know, 48 hours or so, and then RTB'd. I can't remember what that was all about.
I think some of the stuff, John, during that time period, when you got at that time it was Dead 4 NAFCOS. That was a critical time in Air Force, history where, like Nick was saying, not really comprehending that a Scene Master Sergeant is out there doing these things. But we had no officers in the career field. And so we'd always come under whatever unit, squadron that we were located with, helicopter or C-130 or early on a composite unit, and they split those up. So those were our commanders and our chain of command. So we really, we did whatever they said we would do for the most part, or whatever monies came down to us. So during that time period in the mid 80s, Pararescue was floundering a little bit. You know, there wasn't a war going on. Peacetime is like, well, we're spending all this money for guys that are just sitting around having fun, jumping out of airplanes and scuba diving. So going there at that time when you did through the Dead Four really was a big boost for what Pararescue evolved into now in Air Force Special Operations Command. So, I mean, I don't know if you want to talk any about that. I just, I don't know all the
Well,
management side at the Upper Air Force, but I know those things were going on.
well, the thing is too that when I was glad that I got picked to do it because I was fulfilling a dream that I had, or you could call it a dream or a wish that Pararescue would get the combat training and that we didn't need to be attached to an airplane, and they were getting ready to close the career field down. I mean, I heard scuttlebutt along those lines that why do we need PJs anymore? We're attached to the airplane, but yet there were some senior NCOs in Pararescue that didn't want to do halo work, that didn't, that wanted to stay attached to the airplane to go down and pick up a casualty and go. And I knew the future was going to change, that you just couldn't do that. If you wanted to keep Pararescue alive, you had to concentrate. And when I was at headquarters medical was on you're physically fit to handle any medical situation they got out there. And that was paramount because all the rest of the stuff, they got other people that can do that stuff, and have done it. Guys that go down and the Army does, they'll send a guy down the hoist to go get his buddy and bring him back up and, pick people up and whatnot. But if Pararescue wanted to stay alive, they needed to get into combat tactics. And that's where we headed, and that's what we did. And unfortunately, I retired and didn't see it to where it's at today, but it was on its way, and it is what it is today. So,
Well, yeah,
Well,
during that time period, there was that talk of why do we need to spend all this money on pararescuemen to do all these other things when we can just have a emergency medical technician, a DMT assigned to the helicopter to do that job. And we expounded into AFSOC, Special Operations Command, was a really the conventional side of pararescue and AFSOC side of pararescue benefited from that move.
well, one of the things is we were attached to the airplane, and that commander of that airplane controlled what the PJ did. And I just listened to a young pararescueman. I think he might have been, I don't know, an E8 or something, that something awful happened. A guy got drug out the door. He got smashed. He might have been dead on the way out, and all of that stuff. But he got into an argument with the pilot because the pilot wouldn't let him jump in with his men. And that was not the way with us there. I ran that. If I was on that air or PJ, we were on that helicopter. That pilot in special operation, he had no say. Like I'd say, put us in. He put us in. Do this, and they did that. And that's the way it should have been. And whether the PJ wanted to jump in 10 foot of snow or water or what, the PJ's making that decision. It's not resting upon that pilot. He's not in charge of the pararescueman. His job is, I hate to say it, but you're a taxi driver. You take me and get me in there and get me out of there and, let me do my job. And that's where we still have it today. I couldn't believe it when these guys couldn't jump in and the pilot wouldn't let them go.
I think that the fight between PJs, crows, controllers, stows, and a pilot is just a tale as old as time. And yeah, I always approached it as like, hey, I'm the one inheriting the risk to jumping, to fast roping, to doing anything. Once I hit the ground, my shoes touch the ground, I am the supported commander. I think the pilots have like this impression that they have to be like our moms sometimes. And they're like, oh, we need to take care of them. We don't want to put them in that situation. Well, we're freely accepting the risk, and we're giving ourselves the own authority to do that too. So it's a tough thing.
Well, you know, that is a trouble spot with me, and it always was. And that's why when I got in there, I made sure that I called the shots. Pararescuemen, whoever was the PJ, called the fucking shots when we were in those types of situations, not the pilot of the airplane. Now, if there was an Army guy that was involved in it, or a Delta operator or something, you know, or SEALs guys, and they control that to say whether we go or not, you know, then I can understand that. We'd roll with whatever they were doing. But to have the aircraft commander who is worried about whether he's going to get, you know, promoted, or he don't want to have that on his rap sheet or something, he's a taxi driver, and that's what they were. You know, I mean, you hate to say that, and they have a very important job, and you know, etc. But they put them in charge of something they don't know. You know, and as long as you got sane PJs too. Now you get some cowboys, you know, and we have them in Pararescue like anywhere else that can really screw things up. You know, but if you got a good trusted guy out there, that's what you train them for. And you guys that went through now this time and this last decade are unbelievably trained more in a lot of aspects than our seniors were, you know, and to make these decisions. And I think that it's a good place to have the officers to defend the PJs, because the guys were out there, and you know, they didn't really, they used to say we can't trust the PJs, you know, enlisted guys. I mean, that was just an enlisted officer type thing. But, you know, if you're a combat rescue officer, I'd assume that those guys were on top of it, and they took the oath, and they believed in the career field, and they wanted to do the job and do it correctly, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know
Yeah,
what the
I was-
relationship between them was ever, you know?
Yeah, so that's what I came in at. I mean, I came in as a second lieutenant, combat rescue officer all the way through. I guess I am the being medically retired. I'm a perfect example of why people enlist in an officer relationship. Sometimes it's just like a fun jabbing contest, because people tell me like, hey, you should have put the office in officer a little bit more. You wouldn't gotten hurt on those jumps. But it was always advocacy. I knew I was a crow. I knew PJs are the guys that are always to do the mission. And when I was young and leading as a team commander, and like in Afghanistan and other deployments, it was nice to run with the guys. But I always knew that there was going to be a point in my career where I would have to step back, advocate, make sure the guys got the mission, and do that. With it during your time as a PJ, the absence of an officer, it sounds like you, when you were at the 2-4, you really took that role of advocacy and like promoting the PJ's work to get to the highest level of our military, like really well. Like it seems like you just took that and ran with it, with the SAR packages, map. I'm reading like your performance report, you instituting the map team. So I think it's awesome. It's awesome that we're able to talk to you right now
God.
too.
Well, you brought up I had an 8 APR. Well, we had a PJ on the team, and he couldn't run past his PT test. And the NCO at that time was in charge of the unit,
Yeah.
his master sergeant, and he told me to take him out and pass him on the PT test. So I took him out, and he ran, and he failed the PT test. So he says, well, take him out tomorrow. So I took him out tomorrow. He didn't pass the PT test. He told me again, take him out and pass him. I'm like, okay, I got the message. I took him out and brought him back, and I flunked him. And
That's-
that guy gave
yeah.
me an 8. You got to do your PJ, and it cost me.
What John is referencing right now is he has a flawless performance report record. Got him. It was all 9 out of 9, except for 1 8 in your entire career. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
But I'm sure you wear that as a badge of honor, maybe as well.
Well, you just have I just don't, I don't do stuff like that. You know what I mean? Now, if it's between, it depends on what it is, and that's detrimental to the mission, and you go out on I've never been on a jump mission, but back in the day when you jumped, they always put a launch over the side. Now, you don't know who's picking you up. You don't know if he's bilingual or he speaks English or he's talking Turkish. You have no clue. You're getting picked up by these guys, and the water's rough, and they got hard boats. They're out there not picking you up in a soft boat. If you get banged up, killed, whatever, and I know people have gotten hurt on jump missions, you've got to have your shit together.
You've probably developed like a leadership philosophy in your time in the Air Force and leaving the Air Force. Is there any advice you would give to a young PJ right now, in their career, with some of the struggles that you had, some of the good moments and missions that you had?
My advice is make sure you stay physically fit. Make sure that you know how to do your job. If you're not a good medic, you're worthless. If you don't know your medicine and you're not physically fit and a team player, you got to be a team player. It's not all about you, some people, it goes to their head and it's about them, and other guys could care less, and if you're going on a survival trek or whatever, don't pack along canned ham. I mean, that's been done before, and keep your weight, and, be what's expected of you. When people want to see a pararescueman, they want to see a stud like Scotty Guerin, he's standing there with muscles popping out his earlobes, and he's pushing 70 years old, So that's what they expect from pararescue. I quit really drinking 36 years ago. I just said, if I got to quit drinking, if I have to quit drinking to quit smoking, that was it. I stopped both of it cold turkey. Now I'll still have a beer with you, but I don't get inebriated anymore. Maybe a beer once a month or a year or whatever, no more. But that's, get caught up in that, and they continue it as they go on. And you wonder why we kill ourselves.
Yeah.
But going in, my daughter called me up yesterday, and she's got a friend that he's really physically fit, and he wants to go be a pararescueman. And Dad, what can you tell him? That that's it. What I can tell him is, learn everything you can about what pararescue is about, so you know what you're getting into. Stay physically fit and know your job. You've got to know your medical. You got to be into it. If you're going in it just to be a skydiver, forget it. If you're going in it to be a shooter or something like that, go in the Army or the Marines or something. That's not what pararescue is about. Pararescue is saving the lives. You're in there to be a person who gives someone a chance to live. And that's what your job. But that's why we do these things that others may live, And a lot of men have, done it. We've done it. And we got a hell of a reputation, a good one, And there's always a loose link somewhere, and you got to find it and fix it.
Well said.
And,
Well said.
telling a young guy, I mean, I have a nephew that just joined the Space Force, and before that he was talking about going in the Coast Guard, be a Coast Guard diver, and he was asked, wanted to know different things, and I would tell him if I did tell him, I didn't tell him anything, but there's not much you can tell them. And what'd they tell you before you became a PJ? Meet a lot of girls, or that's a bonus now. That comes with the career field.
Yeah. No, I mean, I
Trouble, stay away.
I had a chief tell me, and he's a good friend of mine. People would ask him, like when he was running the selection program for pararescue or and combat controllers at Lackland, he'd go along and he'd tell the guy, you're going to be a PJ, you're going to be a controller, he'd pick them. And they said, how did he do it? He said, well, I always pick the handsome guys for PJs. I said, you did that shit? I laugh, Scotty was a chick magnet. We'd go out to Bennigan's or somewhere, and Scott would come in there with them big blue eyes and built like a what do you call that? Marble Man or whatever the hell they are. He was built like a brick shit house, and the girls were on him with those eyes of his. He'd look at them and man, you just hang around and pick up the remnants. Well, it's just that couple of things that are important that there I was, a high school dropout, voted least likely to succeed in life. And I get out of the military 20 some years later with a college degree and a high school diploma, and accomplished all that I did accomplish, while I was in. And it tells me that the military needs to look at when you tell someone they're going to be a clerk typist, you need to find more out about that man or woman and make sure that's really their genre, whatever they're going to get into. If the guy's a wrench bender and he loves to work on automobiles, why don't you send him the material maintenance? Back in my day, they just slammed you with it. You're this, you're that, you're going to go do this, you're going to do that, you learn it. And I was put in the wrong career field. That's what I would say, lessons to be learned, that you find your slot in life to what you want to be. And I wanted to be in the military, and I enjoyed it. I liked being a soldier or an airman or whatever, but I needed to find the right job. So that's what it's about. You got to like it.
Working for John was a great boss. He was a hard ass. He was perfectionist, and wanted you to be the best that you could be. So he pushed his guys hard, but he would take care of the guys. You do what you're supposed to do. John's going to take care of you. I can remember one of the times, like back in the early days there when there was only 5 of us in there, and we were in our medical room that we had there, and they have a little briefing to us and say, look, you guys need to do your job as a pararescueman. You be the best you can do. Don't get involved in any of the other arguments or any of the problems that are going on. You just focus on your job. I'll take care of the top cover and take care of administrative side. And so, that's what it was. He was a hard ass, and he'd be hard on us, but nobody else could be hard, could step in and do that kind of actions to us or belittle us or anything. He was going to take care of us there. So he was a good boss.
Thank you, Scott. You got a lot of ink. Did you have that before you became a PJ?
No, nothing. I got my first tattoo at like 18, and then yeah, I just kind of kept going with it.
I have a tattoo on my ass of a Playboy bunny head. When I was going through PJ school, me and 2 other PJs, Walter White and Troidel, we went down to Pensacola from Eglin and got Playboy bunny heads tattooed on our ass. And we had this thing, you remember the Bunny Butt Club? You bet your left cheek I am, And yeah, that was a beer thing. And then they came up with the green feet over there. And that was really cool. Guys got green feet. Road Runner, you saw all kinds of. I never would really got into the tattoos because I was all about survival. If I get shot down, I become a prisoner of war. I'm going to lie my way out of it. I'm going to tell them like what Neil Black did. He told him I was a medic. So they called him Baby Doc because he was a little guy, smaller man, stature. And he kind of got through it, and that was always going to be my MO. I was either a 702 administrative clerk that couldn't type, or I was a medic, and that's it. I'm not some high speed guy. So I've been wanting to get tattoos for years, and I just never lived really close to it. I mean, I was going through a marriage and a divorce and a custody battle and all that shit. And I just never got the ink that I wanted to get. So on April Fool's Day of this year, a buddy of mine who lives near me here, civilian, he had just bought himself that that high-powered Mustang. I wanted it. I bought it. He said, I'm 68 years old or 65. I'm like, fine. And I said to myself, fuck it, man. I want it. I'm going to get it. And it was like 7 o'clock at night on April Fool's. And I went in and I got my ink. Here, you see it?
Oh, nice. All right. Hell yeah.
Yeah. So that's the start. And I've got some others that I got and I'm going to lay out. One of them is too, I haven't seen anybody with it, but when I went to the first, what we call founders for the 2-4, if you belong to the 2-4, you went into special operations, and there's a knife with the wings on it, you know, and I think that they've adopted that now into the overall patch. But I just want to get that thing on there. And I was thinking about getting my Jolly Green patch with my 100 mission tab. You know, you get a tab, you put 100 missions. I think I might do that, you know, and some other ink, you know, but you know, my wife thinks I'm crazy, but I don't care. I'm still a kid. I'll be 82 in August. And, you know, I'm planning on being around till 102, maybe.
But you did a good job.
Long as the
Hard to kill.
quality of life is still there, you know. This whole COVID bullshit is really a rude awakening to me, you know. Take 10 steps forward and go back 5, you know. So I just got to keep hammering away.
This has been awesome. Is there any outstanding like kind of things in your career? We kind of brushed over Hamilton and Pease Air Force Base, but
well, we did all the space shots and stuff. I mean, I was the team leader for the first moon landing in Panama City, Panama. And I got to party my ass off down there with the civilians like nuts when we landed on the moon. So that was a rough job, man. You know, so it does have some perks, you know. There's a lot of missions that I can't think of that we did. I mean, I've picked up bodies, got guys crashed planes and stuff, you know. I've lost some really terrific guys that were killed, and you know, and it happens, you know, it just happens, you know. But good men, good men. And the last one, which just kind of really, when I was vice president of the PJ Association, my job, part of that was that I would always call the family and talk to them and stuff, you know, and get the information about the funeral and that. And that was getting to me, you know, I'm getting older myself and whatnot. And the last one was Fredzo Jenkins, who was a really top-notch PJ, you know, but Fredzo was like championship handball, racquetball. Nobody could beat him, you know, but he beat himself because he had to have his knees replaced, right? Well, he got his knees replaced, and we were burying a PJ, Greg Lepley. We were burying Greg at this place up in Pennsylvania there at military cemetery. And he showed up. And how you doing? Whatever. And he lives not too far from where my ranch was in Virginia. And his wife, Holly, well, Tredzo was out hookah diving. You know what that is with a tube? Like you're hooked up to the thing. And like, I don't know what they're grabbing, lobsters or gigging flounders or what. And they say he popped to the surface and yelled something and then was gone. He died. And I had to call Hilly up, his wife, who I've known for 40 years or more or whatever, you know, and Fredzo's no longer there, you know, and she's crying, and it gets tough. And that's why I kind of walked away from that job after doing it for 5.5 years. My tenure would have been up 6 months, but at the same time, I was having surgeries done. You know, I had prostate problem, I had a hip problem, I had eyes, you know, all this shit going on, and it was just getting to be too much. So I walked away from being the vice president anymore, and they got somebody else to take it over. But that becomes tough when you get to that point when you're calling up the wives and you're having to tell them. And what killed Fredzo was, I believe, and I told her that I think what happened is he had an air embolism, and it killed him because he had the total knees done. And you're down there and you get down below 1 atmosphere and it changes your whole function in your body. And he threw a clot. So that's why, you know, she says, do you think I should have it or not? But do what you want, you know? But, you know, I don't think there was anything that illicit was going on with her. But that's just an example of, you know, what what goes on, with that job, and that gets tough after a while. I buried my buddy Dave Slager, where they used to say, if you see Slager at Pighini's right there too, we were asshole buddies, and I had to bury him not too long ago too, a couple of years ago, right here in Florida. So when you start kissing your buddies goodbye, it kind of gets on you the older you get. And, it's kind of like I said to somebody recently, drinking a beer for all my friends, for each one of them. I lost count, so I guess I'll start over.
Wow. Yeah.
So I go all the way back to Nick Clemens, man. I mean, that's a long time ago. I remember them. I remember meeting the PJ that he was at the Bridge of Remagen. He was a medic in the Army, became a PJ later. And then we lost guys along the way for like Crusher Jones. He was in the class behind me. Oh, he's another guy, placed fourth in the Mr. America over 40 contest. I have a picture of him. He is built like a brick shithouse, Luther, but he was no way he was going to free fall. And he called me, John. I said, well, I can't help you, man. And they wanted me to try to see if I could work in the fact, I mean, I'm in special operations now and I can't control anything there, but I wouldn't have anyway. If you're required to be a pararescueman, the pararescueman, you're supposed to free fall now. So a lot of guys had to go through Halo school, and or they pulled a fast one and they changed it, and we didn't have to go to the Army. They started training you. Like, where did you go to Halo school at?
I went with the SEALs out in Otay Lakes, just east of San Diego.
Well, see, that's something new. They started qualifying guys for free fall somewhere else. I don't know. Scott, do you know where it was?
Well, I thought the schoolhouse now was up in, was it Marana?
Yeah, they're doing that, and then Yuma as well. They're doing Coolidge, Marana, Yuma.
Yeah.
Yuma's what I meant.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, like guys, and even Scuba, Scuba came on with the space program, more or less, when the guys started working on the Gemini and Mercury and Apollo and that. And if you couldn't do Scuba, you couldn't be a PJ. So it had to be strict across the board. So you didn't have a half a PJ out there. And that all PJs should be trained the same. I don't think you should have a micro or a mini or an almost, You need to keep the career field fervently in line with what the job is, and they can go anywhere under any climatic condition and do the job.
Yeah.
So, especially if it's on a Hawaiian beach, next to Fort DeRussy where the tennis courts are, and Malalei's bar over here. We're good at that.
I said it like many times. I don't know where we went wrong. You guys got like Miami, Hawaii, like all these great places. And we're like, hey, you know what? Let's move to Tucson, Arizona,
No,
Valdosta, Georgia. What do we do? Come on.
Patrick Air Force Base, man, where the space shots were. Oh, what a great place to be stationed. Guys you got down there, you couldn't get them out with a crowbar, It's, they get a good place, the guys in New York too, people, I don't know. I like city. I don't want to live in a city, but I liked going to, believe it or not, I like going to Broadway shows and stuff like that back in the day. Doobie Brothers, I was really into them. And like in Hawaii, I got to go to a lot of concerts and stuff, So I enjoyed it, Life is good. It's still good.
Yeah.
I haven't done shit in the last 4 years. And this is one of the best conversations I've had in a long time, where my cognitivity is still here. I can't believe I'm remembering the names that I'm telling you right now when I'm pulling out these guys' names. I mean, Scott will tell you, I've been brain dead, and it's coming back. They're good for me.
I'm sure we'll see you again too.
I
It's been
enjoy
great.
it, though. This is kind of like a reunion.